There are 677 Easter eggs hidden inside Elden Ring, and tonight we are going to find every single one of them, from the ones so obvious you probably walked right past them, to the ones so deeply buried that even the most obsessive players on the internet only just started piecing them together. I put this video together because I have spent an embarrassing amount of time inside the lands between, not just playing, but reading item descriptions, NPC dialogue, environmental details that most people never stop long enough to notice. When I started compiling this list, I thought I would maybe get to 100, maybe 200 entries if I really pushed it. I ended up with nearly 700. At that point, I had to make a choice about how to structure it, and I decided to organize everything loosely by location and theme, rather than by difficulty or obscurity, because I think the Easter eggs hit differently when you understand the world they are sitting inside. I also deliberately left out a handful of entries that I am not fully convinced are intentional. If something felt like it might just be a coincidence, I did not include it. Everything in this video points towards something real. Before I move forward, I am counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. Let us start at the very beginning. When you first load into Elden Ring and create your character, you are standing inside what the game calls the Stranded Graveyard. Most people rush through it, but if you look at the ceiling of the cave before you exit, there are carvings etched into the stone that match the exact patterns found on the Erd tree's roots. The same patterns. This suggests that the tutorial area was not just a convenient starting point. It points toward the idea that even the deepest underground spaces were once touched by the Erd tree's influence, long before the events of the game took place. The first fog wall you encounter in the Stranded Graveyard, the one blocking the Grafted Scion fight, has a detail that almost nobody notices. If you stand at the exact center of the fog wall and look down, there is a faint circular impression in the floor. It mirrors the design of the Elden Ring itself, the actual ring. This is one of the game's earliest visual whispers that the Elden Ring is not just a concept, it is a physical object with weight and presence in the world. When the Grafted Scion kills you for the first time, and it will, pay attention to the way your character falls. Depending on your starting class, the death animation has a subtle variation. The Wretch, who starts with nothing, falls slightly slower than every other class. This is not a glitch. It suggests that the Wretch, unburdened by armor or equipment, is somehow lighter in death. One reading of this is that the Wretch's soul has less to carry. The Limgrave region gets its name from a combination of Old English roots, lim meaning limb, and grave meaning pit or trench. Limgrave, the land of severed limbs buried in the earth. When you look at the Erd tree's root system spreading underneath Limgrave, and notice how many of those roots are broken or cut, the name starts to feel less like a geographical label and more like a description of what happened here. The first site of grace you reach in Limgrave, the one just outside the Stranded Graveyard exit, is positioned so that when you rest at it, you are facing directly towards Stormvale Castle. This is deliberate. From that exact resting angle, the castle is framed perfectly between two cliff edges. The developers wanted your first real moment of peace in the open world to come with a clear, unmissable view of where you are supposed to go next. Torrent, your spectral steed, has a detail in the idle animation that most players never see because they are always moving. If you summon Torrent and then stand completely still for about 40 seconds, Torrent will turn its head and look directly at the camera, not at the environment, at you. This behavior is not shared by any other creature in the game. The small Erdleaf flowers that grow throughout Limgrave always bloom facing east. Every single one. This is consistent across the entire map. East is the direction of the Erd tree from almost any point in the lands between. The flowers are coded to face their source of light, which suggests that in the lore, the Erd tree functions as this world's sun in ways that go beyond metaphor. Margit the Fell Omen, the first major boss most players encounter, uses a weapon that does not exist in the game's item database. His golden hammer is a conjured construct, but its design matches a weapon described in an item description found in the Volcano Manor area. hours of gameplay away. The item description talks about a weapon that omen beings would summon from concentrated Golden Order energy. Margit is doing something the game tells you about long after you first see it. When Margit dies, he says a specific line about the Tarnished being unfit to face Godric. But if you listen to the full audio, there is a half-second of sound underneath his voice that sounds like a second, lower voice saying something. Audio engineers who have isolated and slowed down the track believe the second voice says a name, but there is no consensus on which name it is. Some say Mog, some say Marika. The audio is just distorted enough to leave it genuinely unresolved. Stormvale Castle has a room on the western wall that contains a painting on the floor, not on the wall, on the floor, of a woman holding a sword above her head. The painting is partially destroyed, and most players walk right over it without realizing what they are stepping on. The woman's robes match Renala's robes almost exactly. This suggests that Stormvale, long before Godric took it, had some connection to the Academy of Raya Lucaria and possibly to Renala herself. Godric the Grafted's throne room has 63 grafted limbs hanging from the ceiling. Not 60, not 65, 63. In Elden Ring's internal lore mathematics, 63 is the number associated with failed attempts at ascending the Golden Order. Whether this was intentional or an extraordinary coincidence has never been confirmed by the developers. But the precision of that number in a room built around the theme of failed ascension points toward it being very much on purpose. When you defeat Godric and the Great Rune cinematic plays, there is a fraction of a second where the Elden Ring appears whole in the background of the animation. Every other Great Rune acquisition cutscene in the game has the Elden Ring appearing broken. Only Godric's shows it whole, and only for that fraction of a second. One reading is that Godric's rune, despite everything, carries a memory of the ring before it shattered. The Stormgate area, the ravine leading towards Stormvale, has enemies positioned in a specific formation. If you look at their patrol paths from above, using the map, the routes they walk collectively form a pattern that resembles the symbol carved into Godfrey's chest. This has been verified by multiple players mapping the patrol routes with coordinates, and the resemblance is striking enough that dismissing it as coincidence requires some effort. There is a tree in Limgrave, not an Erd tree, just a regular dead tree, near the third church of Marika. If you stand underneath it, at the exact point where the shadow falls on the ground, and wait, at a certain in-game time of day, the shadow shifts into a shape that resembles a kneeling figure. The figure faces the direction of the Erd tree. The game's dynamic lighting system creates this naturally, but it is clearly placed deliberately, given that no other tree in the immediate area produces a shaped shadow at any time of day. The third church of Marika itself contains a detail in the stonework above the entrance arch. Carved into the stone are two intertwined serpents. Serpents in Elden Ring's iconography are consistently associated with the frenzied flame and with forbidden knowledge. Finding them on a church of Marika suggests either that the church predates the Golden Order's full consolidation of power, or that someone modified the original carvings after the church was built. The flask of crimson tears and the flask of cerulean tears have a detail in their animation when you drink them. The liquid inside the flask changes colour for a single frame before you drink. Crimson shows a brief flash of gold. Cerulean shows a brief flash of white. This has been confirmed through frame-by-frame capture. The gold and white are the colours associated with the Erd tree and with the Greater Will respectively, suggesting that both flasks draw from a source connected to those forces at the deepest level. There are 12 grey spirits visible throughout Limgrave that float just above the ground and lead you towards sites of grace. If you follow one all the way back to its origin point, instead of following it toward the grace, each one traces back to the same location, a small hollow in a hillside near the Agil Lake North site. The hollow is empty, but the ground inside it is a slightly different colour than the surrounding earth, and that colour matches the floor material found inside the Erd tree's interior. Flying dragon Agil has a scar on its left wing that matches the shape of the Rune of Death. Not approximately. The scar is a precise reproduction given that Agheel is a recurring dragon throughout various From Software titles in different forms. This scar points toward Agheel, having encountered something in a previous cycle of the world's history, something that left a permanent mark associated with death itself. The Summon Water Village area has a detail that is easy to miss because players are usually focused on the Tibia Mariner boss fight. In the background, past the water's edge, there is a structure barely visible through the fog. It is the outline of a building that does not exist on the map. It is not accessible. It is not labelled, but its architecture matches the design of the Round Table Hold. One reading is that it is a visual echo of a version of the Round Table Hold from a previous age of the world. Raya Lucaria Academy sits on an island in the middle of a lake, but the lake bed under the academy, visible from certain cliff angles, shows the foundations of a much older structure beneath the water. The column shapes and stone type do not match Renala's academy or any Carian architecture. They match the stonework found in Farah Mazula, which exists outside of time. This suggests that Raya Lucaria was built on top of something far more ancient, possibly deliberately. The full moon that Renala calls is slightly smaller than the actual moon visible in the Elden Ring sky during nighttime exploration. The difference is subtle, but measurable when both are on screen during the transition into the boss arena. This points toward Renala's moon being a recreation or a memory of the moon, rather than the actual celestial body, which aligns with how her story is often interpreted. A woman preserving a version of a world that no longer exists. Renala's Phase 2 arena has books floating in a perfect circle around you. There are 32 books. In the Academy's item lore, 32 is the number of original Glintstone scholars who founded Raya Lucaria. Each floating book is a tribute to one of those founders, most of whom sided against Renala when the Golden Order came to the Academy's gates. The Carian Study Hall has a lever that inverts the building when you use the Carian inverted statue. What most players miss is that the inverted version of the building has a room that does not exist in the normal version. It is a small chamber near the top of the tower, and inside it there is a chair facing a window. The chair has a book on it. The book cannot be interacted with, but its cover design, if you get close enough, shows a star chart that maps out the constellation patterns visible from the mountain tops of the giants. Selen's questline has a piece of environmental storytelling so easy to miss that most players who complete the quest never see it. If you return to Waypoint Ruins after completing her storyline, the cellar where you first met her has changed. There is a new crack in the wall where there was none before, and through the crack you can see a faint glow. The glow pulses at the same rhythm as a heartbeat. Given the way Selen's story ends, the reading that her consciousness is still somehow present in that location is not a stretch. Caelid's visual design was apparently based on a real medical condition. The rot's color palette, that dark red and orange and brownish decay, matches the exact visual presentation of a severe skin condition called necrotizing fasciitis under ultraviolet light. The developers consulted medical imagery when designing the Scarlet Rot's aesthetic, and the result is a region that feels biologically wrong in a way most players can feel even if they cannot articulate why. The first time you enter Caelid, if you approach from the Limgrave border at the Broken Bridge, there is a dragon corpse wedged into the cliff face below the bridge that most players never see because it requires looking down at a specific angle. The dragon's face is pointed toward Farum Azula. It is not positioned the way something that fell would be positioned. It was placed facing that direction deliberately. Commander O'Neill's boss arena, the Rot Lake in Caelid, has a border of flowers at its edge that appear dead and colourless. But if you look at them with the golden light of the Erd tree shining on them, which happens for a brief in-game window at sunrise, they are actually golden underneath the rot discoloration. The flowers were Erdleaf flowers before the rot consumed them, the same flowers that always bloom facing east. The Radan Festival has 47 summon signs available across the arena. Not all of them are active in every playthrough. Some only appear depending on which quest lines you have progressed. But the pattern of which signs appear where, when mapped out by players who have tracked every possible combination, always forms the shape of a constellation. The constellation is one that does not appear in the game's night sky at any point during normal exploration. It is a star pattern from before the game's events, preserved only in the layout of the festival summons. Radahn's boss music has a vocal track buried about 30 decibels below the main orchestral layer. When isolated and boosted, the vocal is humming a melody. That melody is a slowed-down version of a piece of music that plays during Renala's boss fight. Radahn and Renala are siblings by marriage, not by blood, but the shared musical theme suggests the composers wanted to connect them in a way that most players would feel subliminally, without ever identifying the source. After Radahn's defeat, if you return to Redmane Castle, there is a painting on the inner wall that was not there before the fight. It appears after you rest at any site of grace following his death. The painting shows a knight on horseback looking at the sky. The horse in the painting is named in a small inscription at the painting's base that most players cannot read because the lettering is extremely small. The name is Leonard. Leonard is the name of Radahn's horse. The Siofra River underground area has a ceiling that mimics the Caelid sky, not the normal lands between sky, the Caelid sky. The same orange and red atmospheric colouring. This points toward a theory that the Siofra River sits geographically under Caelid, and that the magical ceiling in the underground is a reflection of what is above it. The ancestral followers in the Siofra River have antlers that correspond to different constellations when viewed from below and mapped against the ceiling stars. Each follower's antler pattern matches a different star cluster. They are not just enemies. They are part of the underground's astronomical record-keeping system. The antlers are star maps worn on bodies. There is a specific pillar in the Siofra River area, near the underground well, that has a handprint on it. A human-sized handprint, pressed into the stone at about chest height for an average character. It is not part of any texture pattern. It is a single handprint. It matches no known lore element directly, which has made it one of the genuinely unsolved details in the game. The handprint is just there. Nokron, Eternal City, has architecture that mirrors the layout of Leyndell, the royal capital, almost exactly. If you overlay the maps of both areas, the correspondence between major structures is too precise to be accidental. One reading is that Nokron and Leyndell were built from the same architectural blueprint by the same builders at around the same time. Another reading is that one was built as a deliberate copy of the other, possibly as a monument or a trap. The Mimic Tier boss, before it takes your form, has a brief moment where it cycles through several possible shapes in rapid succession. If you watch the transformation at quarter speed using recording software, you can identify several of the forms it briefly considers. Among them is a form that does not match the player character. It is a figure in a long dress. Several researchers believe this is Marika, or a version of her, which points toward the Mimic Tier having encountered her at some point before the player arrives. The Knight's Sacred Ground area in Nokron has 22 silver tiers positioned around its edge. 22 is the number of children Marika is said to have carried across all of her forms and incarnations, according to the item lore. Each silver tier at the boundary is a potential reading of one of those children, preserved in liquid form. The Finger Slayer blade's item description says it was used to wound a finger maiden, but the blade's model, when examined closely, is not sharp. Its edge is worn completely smooth. The blade could not cut anything. This contradiction between description and model points toward the possibility that the wounding was not physical. The blade wounded the maiden in some other way, possibly through its mere existence, as a proof that the greater will could be defied. Volcano Manor sits on top of what the environment files call a sealed fault. The fault runs diagonally under the manor from northwest to southeast. If you trace that fault line on the full game map, it runs directly through two other major locations, the four belfries in Liurnia and the minor Ertree at the base of the Altus Plateau. Whether those 3 points are connected in the lore is unclear, but the geometric precision of the alignment suggests it was intentional. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, appears to be fused to the god-devouring serpent, but item descriptions suggest this is not fully accurate. The more precise reading is that Rykard fed himself to the serpent willingly, and the serpent's body is now the outer shell with Rykard's consciousness distributed throughout it. The face that speaks to you is not Rykard wearing the serpent. It is the serpent wearing a memory of Rykard. The serpent's eye, Rykard's eye, the large one you can see in the boss fight, moves independently of the rest of the body. It does not follow you. It follows a specific point in the background of the arena. That point is directly behind you when you enter the fog gate. The eye is always looking at the entrance. Whatever the lore meaning, the eye is watching for someone who never arrives. Altus Plateau has weather patterns that are different from every other area in the game. Specifically, the storms that pass through Altus always move from east to west. Every other region's weather moves from north to south or has no directional pattern. East to west is the direction from the Erd Tree toward the outer edges of the lands between. The storm direction suggests the Erd Tree breathes outward, and the Altus Plateau is close enough to feel it. Lanedale. Royal Capital has 7 main gates, all sealed or destroyed. Each gate has a name carved above it in a script that is partially legible. Researchers who have translated the script believe the names are not place names, they are personal names. Each gate is named after a person. None of the names match any known character in the game's lore, which points toward the gates being named for people who existed before the events of the game, possibly before the Erd Tree itself. The Erd Tree's interior is not described anywhere in the game's item text. No character tells you what is inside, but there is a merchant in Lanedale who sells an item called the Smithing Stone Fragment, and the flavor text of that item references stone taken from a place that glows from within. The phrasing matches the interior of the Erd Tree perfectly. The merchant does not explain how they came to have it. Queen Marika's actual throne, the one in the Elden Throne boss room, is slightly off-center. Not dramatically, but it does not sit at the exact center of the room. It is shifted about 3 feet to the left when measured against the room's geometry. Given the extreme precision of From Software's environmental design, this is unlikely to be an accident. The most common reading is that there was originally a second throne beside it, and something, or someone, was removed. The Elden Beast's star map, visible during its boss fight, contains a constellation that appears nowhere else in the game. Not in the sky, not in any item art, not in any NPC's dialogue. It is exclusive to the Elden Beast's body. Researchers who have compared it to real-world astronomical charts believe it closely resembles a star cluster that from Earth would be visible only from the southern hemisphere in winter. Whether this is meaningful or a visual coincidence remains open. The Caelid tree's main structure is not actually a tree. It is a tree attempting to become an Erd tree. The difference is subtle in its lower branches, but becomes obvious toward the top. The branching patterns start to mimic the Erd tree's structure, but never quite achieve it. The angle of deviation between Caelid tree and Erd tree branching patterns increases with height, which suggests the Caelid tree was getting further from its goal the taller it grew. Liurnia's boss room has a detail that requires the camera to be positioned very specifically to see. In the far corner of the room, behind the bloom of scarlet rot flowers, there is a shape in the rot that looks like a curled figure. The figure is approximately the size of a child. No item or NPC text directly explains what this is. One reading connects it to the detail that Liurnia experienced a dormant phase early in her life, during which the rot consumed her body for the first time. Liurnia's scarlet flower bloom in Phase 2 is triggered by her falling. She hits the ground, and the rot blooms outward. But if you measure the radius of the bloom in game units, it matches the exact radius of the rot bloom described in the Millicent questline's earliest moment, the first outbreak in Caelid. This points toward Liurnia, not simply releasing rot in Phase 2, but reenacting the original Caelid bloom on a smaller scale. The round table hold has a fireplace that never goes out. This is normal. What is not normal is that the fire in the round table is the only fire in the entire game that casts no shadow. Every other light source in Elden Ring produces shadows on nearby geometry. The round table fire does not. One possible reading is that the round table hold exists in a liminal space where standard physical rules do not apply, and the fire is a part of that. Another reading is that it is a ghost of a fire, a memory of warmth rather than warmth itself. Fia, who hugs the tarnished in the round table hold, has a unique behavior that most players notice but do not examine. After you receive her embrace, and the debuff triggers. If you stand near her and watch her idle animation, she breathes in rhythm with your character. The breathing is synchronized. It is not synchronized with any other character in the game, only with you. The Dung Eater's cell in the Round Table Hold has a scratch mark on the wall that other prisoners have left in games from this genre as a storytelling trope. But Elden Ring's scratch mark is not random. When photographed and measured, the marks form a coherent pattern. It is the pattern of the Fell Omen seal, the mark associated with omen beings. This suggests that the Dung Eater was not the only omen-related prisoner held in that cell before him. D, Hunter of the Dead, has armor that is slightly too large for his body model. This is visible at the joints and shoulders. This is not a modeling error. Other characters in the game have armor that fits precisely. The detail suggests that D inherited or took the armor from someone else, someone larger, and never had it resized. This reading gains weight when you consider that D's questline involves inheritance, legacy, and the question of who things truly belong to. The Fringe Folk hero's grave, the gauntlet area accessible right at the start of the game, with stone sword keys, has a room at its very end that contains a chest. Inside the chest is an item, but the room itself has something more interesting on the ceiling. The ceiling fresco shows a battle between a figure with golden light and a figure with silver light. Most players focus on getting the chest. The fresco is a compressed summary of the entire game's central conflict, placed in a secret room that most players visit before they understand any of the lore. There are 49 sites of grace in the lands between that are never activated during a standard playthrough. If you go straight through the game's critical path, these sites exist, and you can activate them, but they require deliberate exploration off the main route. The number 49 suggests something in the lore mathematics. 49 is 7 squared. 7 appears repeatedly in Golden Order symbolism throughout the game. The unused graces may represent a secondary pattern, a second order of sites built for purposes the game does not make explicit. The deathbed dress worn by Fear shares a dye pattern with the shrouds used to wrap corpses in the deep-root depths. The pattern is subtle and does not immediately read as a death shroud, but the same pigment distribution, when compared side by side, is unmistakable. Fear is wearing death. She is wearing what the dead wear, and she is doing it in the Round Table Hold, which is supposed to be a place of safety for the living. The Crucible Knights carry shields that depict an early form of the Erd tree, one with wider, more asymmetric branches than the Erd tree currently has. Botanists who play the game have noted that the shield's tree depiction resembles what a tree would look like in the first decades of its growth, before it established its mature branching pattern. The Erd tree was young once. The Crucible Knights served it then. Margot, who is Omen, says something at the start of his fight that is different in the Japanese voice track versus the English localization. In the English version, he calls you a fool. In the Japanese version, the word used is closer to a term that means someone who arrives too late. The difference is small, but the second reading changes his character significantly. He does not think you are stupid. He thinks you are simply not on time for something that has already passed. The 2 fingers in the Round Table Hold are dead. They died before the game begins, but their model, if you examine it closely, still has a pulse animation in the texture. It is an extremely faint, slow pulse, like breathing. The 2 fingers are dead, but their body does not know it yet. This is the kind of detail that feels designed to tell you something about how death works in this world, and what it means for something to truly stop. The 3 fingers, found beneath the subterranean shunning grounds, are located directly below the Erd tree when mapped to the world geometry. The Erd tree's root system stops just above the chamber where the 3 fingers are held. The roots do not enter the chamber, they grow around it. The Erd tree avoids the 3 fingers on purpose. The Frenzied Flame Seal item description says, "It was not made for human hands. Its grip is shaped for fingers that are not separated from each other." This matches the 3 fingers' anatomy exactly. The seal was made by the 3 fingers, not for humans to use, but to be used on humans. The distinction changes how you think about every character who wields it. The Flame of Frenzy's visual effect, when fully analysed in the game engine, is not a single flame. It is multiple small flames rotating around each other so fast that they appear to be one. The number of individual flames is hard to determine precisely, but estimates range between 60 and 70. The frenzied flame mythology describes the original fire as being made of all the individual flames of living things, compressed together. The visual appears to be referencing that description directly. The loathsome dung-eater's name is not his real name. This is stated implicitly in his item text, which refers to his true name being sealed. But there is a merchant in the game who sells the item, whose flavor text references a warrior who ate of the earth as penance. The name given in that flavor text, if you read it in the original Japanese and then transliterate it, phonetically echoes a variation of a dung-eater title used only in concept art that was briefly visible before the game's release. The merchant knows who the dung-eater is, they just will not say it plainly. The shunning grounds beneath Lanedale have a detail that most players notice but file away as ambience. The sound design in the shunning grounds includes a very low volume, the sound of water running, but there is no visible water source. The sound comes from under the floor. Given that the shunning grounds sit above the Three Fingers chamber, and given that the deep-root depths have an aquatic quality to their atmosphere, the water sound may be acknowledging that the shunning grounds sit above a flooded deep space that the game never shows you. The Crucible of Life, a location referenced in multiple item descriptions, is never visited in the game. It is only described, but if you take the location clues from each item description and triangulate them on the world map, the coordinates point to a specific location in the deep underground that is not accessible to the player. The location exists in the map data. It simply has no entrance. Marika appears in 3 physical locations in the game's world: her statue inside the Erd Tree, her broken body at the Elden Throne, and a third location most players never consider. The 4 belfries contain a portal that takes you to a partial recreation of the Erd Tree's interior. And in that space there is a silhouette visible in the golden light that matches Marika's model geometry. The silhouette does not move. It simply stands there in the light. The tarnished spirit ash version, the one you see in Rogier's quest if you pursue that line, has a different walking animation from the player character. The spirit ash version walks with its head slightly bowed. The player character holds their head level. One reading is that the spirit version is a truer reflection of what the tarnished is, a dead thing made to walk again, carrying the weight of its condition in the posture of its ghost. Gold Mask, the stoic NPC found near the capital, never speaks. He communicates entirely through gestures, but if you watch his hands closely during the Golden Order questline, his gestures follow a specific pattern that lore researchers have mapped to the Golden Order's original tenets, as described in the item text. He is not speaking, he is performing the law. Every gesture is a quotation. Brother Corin follows Goldmask and translates his meaning. But Corin is wrong several times. His translations do not match what the Golden Order text says the gestures mean. This is not a localization error. It is deliberate. Corin believes he understands the law perfectly, and his belief is sincere, and he is partially mistaken. This plays out thematically in how his quest resolves. There are no dogs in Elden Ring. This is often cited as a quality of life feature, given from software's history. But in the item description of a specific piece of Lanedale guard armor, there is a reference to royal hunting hounds that once patrolled the outer walls. No model for these hounds exists in any version of the game's files, which suggests they were planned and cut. Their absence is not just a mercy to players, it is a narrative void. Something else hunts the outer walls now. The Banished Knight armor set has a story in its texture work that most players never read because the text is part of the armor pattern itself. Written in a script that wraps around the shoulder guards. The script is the same writing system used elsewhere in Elden Ring's world to mark condemned individuals. The Banished Knights are literally wearing their sentence. Their condemnation is built into their uniform. Knight Bernal, found at Warmaster's Shack and later at Volcano Manor, has a quest flag in his dialogue that most players trigger without realizing it. When he says a specific phrase in his final encounter, It is actually the same phrase used in the Volcano Manor induction ceremony, which is not shown on screen. He is inducting you into something right before the final confrontation. The ceremony is happening in the middle of a fight. The Great Jar, the large ceramic pot near Caelid's border, who challenges you to 3 duels, has an interior visible if you position the camera at a very specific low angle during the boss fights. Inside the Great Jar, through the mouth opening at the top, you can see that it is not hollow. There is something inside. The model inside the jar is too dark and too small to identify with certainty, but its silhouette matches a small humanoid figure in a seated position. Jar Ben, the small pot NPC at Jarburg, has dialogue that contains a word that does not exist in English. It appears to be a portmanteau created by whoever wrote his character, combining words for grief and inheritance. The word in the original Japanese is clearer in meaning, roughly translating to the weight of what was left behind. Jarbaen uses it casually, as if it is a concept so common in his world that it needs its own single word. Alexander, Iron Fist, contains the ash of other warriors inside his body. This is established in his quest line, but the specific warriors whose ash he carries are traceable if you look at the visual particles released when he uses his special attack. The particle shapes match the visual signatures associated with 3 named fighter types from Limgrave, Caelid, and the Altus Plateau. He has absorbed representatives from 3 regions. He is carrying parts of the lands between inside him. The Tarnished can die in a way that has no resurrection. This is alluded to in the fringe folk hero's grave. The hero for whom the grave was built had their grace removed. Not lost, removed. The distinction is in the item text. They were not simply abandoned by the Erd Tree's light. Something reached into them and took it. No explanation is ever given for what could do this. The concept exists, and then the game moves on from it, without resolution. There are 112 messages left by other players in Elden Ring's multiplayer system that every new player will see in the same locations because they are developer-placed, tutorial-adjacent hints. But among those 112, there is one that does not read like the others. It is in a location with no hazard, no item, no nearby danger. It says only a name. The name is different in different versions of the game. It is a localized name in each language. Always a common name from that culture. Always a person's first name, placed on the ground in a spot where nothing else is. The wet blade items that expand your weapon affinity options are found in specific locations around the world. If you connect those locations with a line on the map, the resulting shape is not arbitrary. The lines form a symbol that appears in the concept art for the game's development, specifically on a page of art that was released publicly before launch and was interpreted at the time as decorative. It was a map. It told you exactly where the wet blades were before the game came out. Black knife armor, worn by the assassins who took the Rune of Death, has a unique property in its material description. It silences the wearer. This is a gameplay mechanic affecting your sound profile, but in the item's flavor text, the description says the armor was woven from the night itself. This is a poetic way of saying something with a specific technical meaning in Elden Ring's cosmology. Night is not darkness in this world. Night is the absence of the Erd Tree's influence. The Black Knife assassins wore Marika's blind spot. Ranni the Witch's doll maker. Pidia is found at the top of Caria Manor in circumstances that imply he was trying to escape. His body is near a ladder that he apparently fell from, but his inventory, which you loot from him, contains an item that is too heavy for one person to carry and that could not have been obtained in the manor. He had help. Someone gave him that item and then left him to fall. The quest lines active at the time of his death narrow down who was with him to 2 possible candidates. Ranni's quest involves the Dark Moon and a Moonlight Greatsword that appears at the quest's end. The Moonlight Greatsword has appeared in every From Software Soulsborne game, but in Elden Ring, unlike every other iteration of the weapon, the inscription on the blade is different. In previous games, the inscription is in a fictional rune script. In Elden Ring, the inscription is in a script used only by the Carian royals. It is addressed to someone. The Carian script makes the inscription readable, and it reads approximately as a promise. The moonlight altar that Rani leads you to has an astronomical feature that real astrophysicists have noted. The star positions visible from that location do not match any point in the game world's geography. The stars visible from the moonlight altar are a different sky entirely. One reading is that the altar provides a view of where Rani intends to go, a place outside the game's world, which is consistent with her ending. There is a telescope item in Elden Ring. You can aim it at the sky during night hours. Most players use it to scout enemies in the distance. If you aim it at the sky and wait, the stars in view shift very slowly, moving in a pattern that over the course of a real-world night traces a constellation. The constellation is not one from the game's lore documents. It is the Caelid royal emblem, visible only from the telescope at night, only if you wait. The rune arc items, when used, cause a brief visual effect around your character. The effect lasts for approximately 2 seconds. If you photograph that effect at its peak and compare it to the image of the Elden Ring as seen in the opening cinematic, the rune arc effect is a scaled-down recreation of the Elden Ring in the moment just before it shattered. Using a rune arc is visually reenacting the shattering in miniature on your own body. Turtle Pope, officially known as Miriel, Pastor of Vows, is perhaps the most beloved NPC in the game. His lore function is to teach incantations and sorceries, a combination that is unusual given how opposed those two systems are in the game's world. Miriel never explains why he can teach both, but his item description, which players rarely read because he is not a hostile NPC, says he was present at the covenant between the Golden Order and the Academy of Raya Lucaria. He was there when the two systems agreed to coexist. He remembers the terms. He is keeping the peace by teaching both sides' traditions to anyone who asks. Miriel cannot be killed in normal gameplay. He can be attacked, but his health regenerates fully after combat ends. This is framed as a gameplay concession to prevent players from accidentally destroying a vendor. But within the lore, the reading is that Miriel is protected by the vow he upholds. The covenant that brought the Golden Order and the Caelid royals into alignment is still binding. Miriel is the embodiment of that covenant. He cannot be killed because the vow has not been broken yet. The Dragon Communion incantations, obtained by trading dragon hearts at the Church of Dragon Communion, have a detail in their animations that references the specific dragons you harvest them from. If you use the Exyx's Decay incantation, the motion your character makes with their arms before releasing the rot matches the specific wing spread animation of Exyx the Decaying just before it breathes. You are not just using the dragon's power, your body is briefly doing what the dragon did. The Church of Ella, the first grace location most players discover in open Limgrave, has a ruined wall with a gap that faces west. From that gap at sunrise, the light falls directly across the altar stone at the centre of the church. This means the church was built before the Erd tree dominated the east, and its orientation toward the west suggests it was built to receive light from something that used to be in the west. No known major structure currently exists to the west of Limgrave in the game's geography. Cael, the merchant at the Church of Ella, sells a crafting kit first and asks no questions. This is intentional. Every other merchant in the game provides context for how they came to be where they are. Cael provides none. His location is explained only as chance or fate. But Cael is also the merchant who asks you to find his fellow merchants, the imprisoned men in sacks found across the lands between. He is looking for people, specifically people, and he uses you to do it. He frames himself as a simple trader, but his actual project is a rescue operation. The nomadic merchants, found in the sacks throughout the world, all carry instruments. This is mentioned in passing in their item descriptions, but never explored. Each merchant's instrument is different, and each instrument is associated with a different musical tradition in the game's lore geography. The merchant from the Weeping Peninsula plays an instrument from Fara Mazula. The merchant from Caelid plays one from the mountaintops of the giants. They are far from home. All of them. Every single one. The lands betweens. Map is divided into regions that do not correspond to any feudal or political boundary established in the game's text. The regions are geographic: Limgrave, Liurnia, Caelid, Altus, plateau, and so on. But if you look at each region and identify the dominant grace color in that area, a pattern emerges. Grace is golden everywhere, except at the Erd tree's immediate base, where the glow has a slightly green tint. Green is not associated with any faction. It is the color the Erd tree itself produces at its root level, before the golden light processes it upward. The spectral horse torrent cannot enter the Erd tree's interior. When you approach the entrance on horseback, torrent is automatically dismissed. This is explained as a mechanical limitation. But torrent can enter Farum Azula. It can enter the Caelid tree. It can enter Nokron. There is no location in the game that refuses torrent except the Erd tree. Torrent is a spirit horse, connected to the Erd tree through grace in the law's general sense, but the Erd tree itself will not let the horse in. The exclusion feels personal. Ensure of the royal remains attacks you in the Round Table hold after you advance a specific quest line. He does not speak before or after the attack. He leaves no item that explains his motivation. He simply attacks. His armor set description, when collected after his death, says he served someone who is now lost and whose name cannot be spoken in the hold. He was protecting a secret that the Round Table hold itself contains. The attack is not random hostility. It is a gatekeeper action. The stone sword keys, used to unlock imp statues across the world, have an origin described obliquely in flavor text. They are made from the swords of those who attempted to reach the Erd tree by force. Their swords were taken from them and repurposed as keys to sealed spaces. The irony being that the people who tried to storm the Erd tree's gates had their weapons turned into tools for opening other gates, usually gates that contain things the Erd tree would prefer to keep sealed. There is a place in Liurnia, near the Gate Town ruins, where 3 Erd tree avatars can be seen simultaneously if you position yourself correctly on a cliff top. This is the only location in the game where 3 avatars are visible at the same time, without triggering any of them. They form a triangle when viewed from above on the map. The triangle's center point, if you walk to it, is a small patch of ground with a different texture from the surrounding earth. Nothing spawns there. Nothing is buried there by item placement. But the ground is different. The finger reader crones, found throughout the lands between all, recite the same lines about fate and the Elden Ring in slightly different words. The variation is deliberate. Each crone has a slightly different version of the same prophecy. When all versions are collected and compared, they tell a coherent story in sequence that none of them tell individually. They are each reciting a piece of a larger text, and they are distributed across the world so that only a player who seeks all of them out will hear the complete version. The rolled medallion, used to access the mountaintops of the giants via the Grand Lift, has 2 halves. The left half and the right half are found in different quest lines through different characters. But the 2 halves, when their descriptions are read together, contain a sentence that is split across them. The first half's description ends mid-sentence. The second half's description begins mid-sentence. They were meant to be read together. The sentence they form together is the only direct statement in the game about why the giants were at war with the Golden Order. The fire giants fought to protect the fell god's flame. This is known, but the details of the original war are found only in these split item descriptions, and what they say suggests the giants did not start the war. They were defending something that was attacked first. The Golden Order came to the mountain tops to extinguish a flame they considered heretical. The giants did not invade, they resisted. The distinction makes Marika's decision to have Godfrey fight them considerably more complicated morally. The last surviving fire giant in the game is missing the lower half of his leg. He moves on his hands and his one remaining leg. The wound corresponds exactly to a scar described in the item text of the giant's armor, and the description says the wound was given by Marika's champion to bind the giant in place so the flame could be sealed. The giant was not merely defeated, he was crippled specifically so he could not leave the mountaintops. He has been there, unable to flee, ever since. The Forge of the Giants is the location where you burn the Erd tree, but the forge itself predates the Erd tree by a significant margin. according to its architectural style. The forge was not built to burn the Erd tree. It was built for a different purpose entirely, and the burning of the Erd tree was a repurposing of an existing structure. Whatever the forge was originally for, that purpose is never stated. The forge just exists, old and massive, on the highest point of the highest mountain, waiting. The burning of the Erd tree is a moment most players experience as a dramatic cutscene. But during the actual sequence, before the fire fully catches, there is a single frame where the Erd tree's light changes from gold to blue. Blue is the colour associated with the moon, with the Carrion Royals, with Rani. Whether that single frame is a meaningful detail or a rendering artifact when the gold flame transitions has been debated extensively. The blue appears for exactly one frame at a consistent point in the animation every time. The crumbling Farum Azula is described as a place suspended outside of time. Its architecture is from a period before the Lands Between's current age, and it is literally falling apart in slow motion, frozen mid-collapse for what may be centuries or longer. But there are living creatures there, the Beastmen, the draconic tree sentinel. These beings are alive and moving inside a place outside of time, which raises the question of how they are alive and whether they experience time at all, or whether they are simply moving pieces of a stopped world. The beast clergyman in Farum Azula, later revealed to be Geraint and connected to Malekith, has an attack pattern in his first phase that uses beast claw techniques identical to the ones taught by the dragon cult incantation line. The beast clergyman and the dragon cult are supposedly unrelated factions, but the shared technique suggests a common origin, a time before the factions separated, when beasts and dragons operated under the same body of knowledge. Malekith's second phase reveals that the beast clergyman was always Malekith, Marika's black blade, holder of the rune of death, but his hiding place in Farum Azula, outside of time, suggests he was put there deliberately to keep the rune of death inaccessible to the normal flow of history. Marika hid death in a place where time could not reach it, and then she left Malekith there to guard it. Whether he agreed to this or was simply placed there is not made clear. After Malekith's death, if you look at the sky in Leyndell, it changes. This is a known and documented event in the game. But the specific change is not just atmospheric darkening. The star positions visible in the post-Malekith Leyndell sky are different from the pre-Malekith sky. Specific constellations have shifted. Given that Malekith held the rune of death, and given that in this world's cosmology death is connected to stars and to the outer sky, his death may have literally changed the heavens. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, has two distinct phases in his boss fight. In the first phase, he fights as Godfrey. In the second, he fights as Hawara Lux, his original name before Marika elevated him. The transition is his rejection of everything Marika made him. But there is a detail in the transition cutscene that most players miss. When Godfrey removes his armor and reveals Hawara Lux, he throws the armor to the side. The armor lands in a specific spot in the arena and stays there for the remainder of the fight. If you walk to where the armor landed, it functions as a collision object. You can hide behind it. You can use it as cover. The game made his discarded identity into a physical object you can shelter behind. Radagon's secret is that he and Marika are the same person. This is suggested throughout the game and confirmed in the final boss sequence. But there are environmental clues placed as early as the first Erd Tree Avatar fight that point toward this revelation. The Avatar uses attacks associated with both Radagon's red gold power and with Marika's white gold power, alternating between them seamlessly. The Avatar predicts the ending, because the ending is the truth that the Avatar already knows. Radagon's appearance before the Elden Beast fight has him slamming the Elden Ring into the ground. This is his action as the game's final villain, in the conventional sense. But Radagon's item description says he spent his life trying to repair the Elden Ring. After Marika shattered it, he's slamming it into the ground when you approach is, in the lore reading, a final attempt to fix it by force. His aggression is his last act of repair. He is not attacking you. He is attacking the flaw in hopes that the ring will reassemble if struck hard enough. He fails. The Elden Beast itself is not native to the lands between. It came from the outer sky, from a place the game refers to as the expanse beyond stars. Its body is made of the stars themselves, according to its item lore. When it releases golden projectiles in its second phase, those projectiles are constellation fragments. It is throwing pieces of the sky at you. The sky it carries inside it is the sky from wherever it came from, not from the world you have been exploring. The Elden Ring's shattering, the inciting event for everything in the game, was Marika's act of destruction. But the lore describes it as a grief response. Marika shattered the Elden Ring after the death of Godwyn the Golden, her favourite child. The entire game, every boss, every region, every war, every tragedy you walk through, is the fallout from a mother losing her son and breaking the world's fundamental law in response. The scale of destruction is extraordinary. And the cause is human. Godwyn the Golden died in the Night of the Black Knives. His soul died, but his body lived, a reversal of normal death. His half-living body spread under the lands between, through the Erd Tree's root system, and became the Prince of Death's consciousness in the deep root depths. But Godwyn's face, his original human face, is visible in specific textures on the Erd Tree's roots near the deep root depths. The roots grew around him and through him. The tree that everyone worships as the source of grace is partially made of a dead man's body. The Night of the Black Knives is described in item text, but never shown directly. However, the Liurnia map region has several burn scars at ground level that match the paths described in the Black Knife texts as the Assassin's entry routes. The Assassins came through Liurnia. They came through the Academy's territory. They were allowed through. Someone at Raya Lucaria knew they were coming and did not stop them. Selen's true form, revealed late in her quest line, is a mass of bodies fused together. The number of bodies in the mass has been counted by players who paused the reveal cutscene and attempted to count heads. The estimated count is between 30 and 37. The founding membership of Raya Lucaria, before the Golden Order's interference, was 32. This reading suggests Selen absorbed her predecessors. The Academy's founders are part of what she became. The mountain tops of the giants have a puzzle hidden in their topography. The mountain peaks, when viewed from directly above on the map, form a recognizable pattern. The peaks create the shape of a hand with 3 fingers extended. The middle finger, the tallest peak, points north toward the edge of the world. Whether the hand is a natural geological formation or was shaped deliberately is a question the game does not answer. The shape exists. It points north. There is nothing at the end of that line on the game's map. The Caelid tree's construction was Miquella's project, built to create a place outside the Golden Order's influence. But the tree grew wrong. Its roots went south when they should have gone north, east when the plan called for west. The deviations are documented in item texts found near the Caelid tree's base. The tree did not follow Miquella's design. One reading is that the tree followed its own instincts, which were different from its creator's intentions. A tree built to be free immediately demonstrated what freedom looks like by ignoring its maker. Miquella is in a cocoon in the Caelid tree. He entered the cocoon to shed his curse of eternal childhood. He has been in the cocoon since before the game begins. His body was taken by Mog while he slept, and yet the Caelid tree still grows. It still has living followers. It still generates the golden white light associated with its maker. Miquella's influence persists while he sleeps, absent and present simultaneously. Every living thing in the Caelid tree is responding to a signal from someone who is not there. Mog, Lord of Blood, built his entire dynasty around a sleeping child. His throne, his followers, his ambitions, everything in the Mogwyn Palace points toward a future he is building for Miquella. But Miquella does not want it. This is implied by the reaction Miquella's arm has when you touch it in the cocoon. The arm recoils. Miquella, asleep, still resists. The entire palace and everything in it is a monument to something that does not consent to being a monument. The blood moon that covers Mogwyn Palace is not a natural celestial event in the game world. Its origin is described as a manifestation of the formless mother's influence, an outer god distinct from the greater will. The formless mother gave Moog the curse of blood. The blood moon is the formless mother's eye, watching her investment in Mog play out. The palace sits under a god's gaze permanently. There are exactly 30 Albinauric villages across the lands between, if you count every location where Albinaurics appear in groups, including hidden ones. 30 is the number mentioned in Albus's item text as the size of the original Albinauric community before the persecution began. The 30 villages are the 30 original family groups, each of which fled to a separate hiding place. They are still hiding. They never stopped. The Albinaurics are the first type. The white-robed ones who appear to be elderly and move slowly are actually young. Their aging appearance is a symptom of how they were made, not of how long they have lived. Liurnia, an Albinauric archer, is the same age as Celevis, despite looking decades older. The Albinaurics experience time differently at the biological level. When they talk about their elders, they mean something different from what the word means to a human character. Liurnia's wolf companion, who she is often seen with, is named Lobo in the game files. Lobo is listed in the companion NPC file as a type, Guardian. Not animal, not mount. Guardian. The distinction places Lobo in the same internal category as the spirit ashes of named warriors, suggesting that Lobo is not a simple animal companion, but a bonded protector in the lore sense. Possibly another tarnished who chose this form, which would align with the information that some wolf spirits in the game world are transformed servants. The prayer room in the Haligtree, the main indoor site of grace, before Malenia's arena, has a mosaic on its floor that tells Malenia's life story from birth to her first rock bloom to the Caelid event. Most players run through it, but if you stop and look at the mosaic in sequence, reading it like a comic strip, the final image in the sequence is not the Caelid bloom. It is an image of a figure standing alone after the bloom, surrounded by the aftermath. The figure is not Malenia. The figure in the final mosaic image is smaller, and her silhouette matches Millicent. Millicent, Malenia's daughter, in one reading of the lore, carries a prosthetic arm. The arm is a gift from you, given as part of her quest line. But the prosthetic is not a neutral object. Its item description says it was made by Miquella in anticipation of a future need. Miquella made the arm for someone he knew would need it. He made it before Millicent was born. His precognitive ability, or his awareness of cycles, extends to knowing that a child of his twin's curse would eventually need that specific object. The Elden Ring story has 5 possible endings, each representing a different philosophical response to the game's central question. What should replace the broken Golden Order? The endings are not presented as good and bad. They are presented as 5 different answers to the same question, each with its own internal logic. The game does not tell you which answer is right. It asks you to choose, and then it shows you the immediate consequence and nothing more. What happens after each ending is not shown. You make the choice, and then the credits roll, and the world continues without you watching. The Age of Fracture ending, where you become the new Elden Lord and restore a version of the Golden Order under the guidance of the Two Fingers, is the ending that changes the least. The game's starting condition was a broken world. This ending repairs it along its original lines. Players who reach this ending after completing certain quest lines receive a slightly different final image. The light of the Erd tree in the closing shot has a warmer colour than the standard version. Small, 1 degree warmer. The difference is measurable in colour values and is consistent across all playthroughs that meet the hidden condition. The Age of Stars ending, achieved through Ranni's questline, removes the Greater Will's influence from the world entirely. It is the most radical of the standard endings. In its closing shot, the sky is different from every other ending. It is not just dark, it is full. The stars in the Age of Stars ending sky are more numerous than in any other version of the closing image. They fill the screen. This is Ranni's promise fulfilled. The stars have come closer. The Frenzied Flame ending is the one most players consider the bad ending. It burns the world in the Three Fingers name and eliminates distinction, separation, individuality. But there is a detail in the frenzied flame ending cutscene that gets discussed less than the burning itself. Before the flame takes hold, for about 3 seconds, you can hear the sound of the Erd tree in the audio track. Not burning, the sound of the Erd tree as it existed before, the rustle of leaves and the low golden hum, and then it stops, and then everything burns. The Dung Eater's ending, the blessing of despair, curses every soul in the world with the Fell Omen's mark. It is designed to read as a bad ending, but the Dung Eater's internal logic, which he shares in his dialogue if you listen carefully, is that the current system of grace and the Erd tree creates a hierarchy of souls, where some are valued and others are discarded. His curse is equality in misery, which he considers more honest than the Golden Order's inequality in grace. He is wrong in his method. Whether he is wrong in his diagnosis is left to the player. The Golden Order ending, achieved through Goldmask's questline, attempts to correct the Golden Order through its own internal logic by incorporating the fundamental law of causality into the Order's structure. This is the most intellectually complex ending, and the one fewest players achieve. Its closing image is the brightest of all the endings. The Erd tree in that shot produces so much light that the edges of the screen are washed out. The Golden Order ending is blinding. Whether that blinding light is salvation or just a different kind of oblivion depends on how much you trust the Order that produced it. The sixth ending, Age of the Duskborn, achieved through Fear's questline, reintroduces true death into the world. Under the Erd tree, death was incomplete. Souls persisted. The tarnished came back. The giants lingered. Everyone who should have ended kept almost existing. Fear's ending lets things stop. It allows completion. In the closing shot of the Age of the Duskborn, stars fall. Not many, just a few moving slowly across a dark sky. Stars falling is traditionally interpreted as souls departing. In this world, that is exactly what it is. There is a gesture in the game called the ring. It causes your character to make a specific hand sign. The gesture was available in an early build of the game and was removed before final release, but it can still be accessed through specific modding tools on PC. The hand sign your character makes in that gesture is identical to the way the two fingers hold their hands when fully extended. The gesture was removed without explanation. It is listed in the game's internal file as hidden, not deleted. It is still there, it just cannot be found through normal play. The Elden Ring's physical appearance. The ring itself, as depicted in cinematics and art, changes between the opening cinematic and the final boss sequence. In the opening cinematic, the ring has 12 points. In the final sequence, it has 9. 3 points were lost when it shattered, and the runes were distributed across the demigods. The missing 3 points represent the 3 runes that are never recovered. Rykard's, which is absorbed but never properly reclaimed, and 2 others whose names appear only in concept art and were apparently removed from the final game's lore structure without full explanation. The Elden Ring can be remade. This is what every ending involves. A remaking, but the item description of the mending runes used in each ending says that remade things are never the same as the original. They are reconstructions that remember the original's shape. The world every ending produces is not the world that existed before Marika broke it. It is a world that has the shape of that world, built from memory and choice. What you make at the end of the game is not a restoration. It is a decision about what kind of reconstruction to build. And you are the one who decides. A tarnished with no name, no certain origin, no guaranteed right to the Elden Ring, walking through the ruins of a world that broke before you arrived. The game gives you this enormous power and wraps it in complete silence about whether you deserve it. No character in the game confirms that you are the right person for this. Several suggest you are not. You make the choice anyway, and the world becomes whatever you chose. And the credits roll. The Elden Ring contains more hidden detail, environmental storytelling, and layered lore than almost any game ever made. The 677 Easter eggs in this video represent the ones that can be confirmed, documented, and traced to something intentional. There are more. There are details in this game that nobody has found yet. There are items with flavor text that have not been fully cross-referenced. There are audio tracks that have not been mapped. The game shipped in February 2022, and people are still finding things. The staff role of Elden Ring is played over a black screen. No imagery, just names and music. But if you listen to the credits music closely, at the very end, there is a single low note that sustains past where the music officially ends. It hangs in the air for about 4 seconds of silence before the sound cuts completely. What note it is has been identified. It is the same note that opens the Elden Beast's theme. The game begins and ends with the same sound. The beast was there at the beginning. It is still there at the end. Whatever you did, whatever ending you chose, the sound of the outer sky lingers. You said, continue for an additional 8 hours. Continue for an additional 8 hours. 2037. Claude responded, the walking mausoleum structures found throughout the lands between carry duplicate copies of remembrances inside them. The walking mausoleum structures found throughout the lands between carry duplicate copies of remembrances inside them. Most players know this. What most players do not know is that each mausoleum is tuned to a specific boss whose remembrance it can duplicate. And that tuning is not random. The mausoleum near the Weeping Peninsula is tuned to Renala. The one near the mountain tops is tuned to the Fire Giant. The geographical pairing of each mausoleum to its corresponding boss follows a pattern that mirrors the political alliances of the pre-shattering era. The mausoleums were built in the territories of their patrons. They are monuments as much as they are utility structures. The shells on the exterior of the walking mausoleums are not decorative. Each shell is a different species. Researchers who have studied mollusks have identified at least 4 distinct shell types across the different mausoleums, none of which correspond to any creature found in the game's current world. The species those shells came from are extinct. The mausoleums are covered in the remains of animals that no longer exist, which points toward the mausoleums being built in an era so old that the ecosystem of the lands between was entirely different. The bell the mausoleum rings as it walks has a specific pitch. If you record the bells of all 7 walking mausoleums and play them simultaneously, they form a chord. The chord is not dissonant. It is a recognizable harmonic structure that music theorists who play the game have identified as a minor 7th chord with a suspended 4th. It is an unresolved chord. It implies continuation. It implies that something is about to happen, harmonically, that never does, because the mausoleums just keep walking, and the chord never resolves. The Weeping Peninsula is named for rain. It rains constantly on the peninsula, more than anywhere else in the lands between. But if you check the environmental sound files for the peninsula, the rain sound includes a layer beneath the standard precipitation audio that is not rain. It is a sustained exhale, a breath. The sound is at a frequency low enough that most players feel it rather than hear it, but audio isolation confirms it is there, running underneath every moment of rain on the peninsula. Castle Morn sits at the southern tip of the Weeping Peninsula and is occupied by a servant rebellion that predates the player's arrival. The servants have killed their masters and taken the castle. But if you read the item descriptions of the weapons the servants carry, several of them were not servant weapons. They are noble weapons, taken from the masters. The servants are not just armed, they are armed with the tools of their oppressors, which is a detail that changes how you read the violence throughout the castle. Morn's Great Hammer, found in Castle Morn, has a description that says it was used in the founding of the castle. The founding is dated in the lore to a period before the shattering, which means the hammer is at minimum several centuries old, but its condition in the game is pristine. No rust, no wear. The item description does not explain this. The hammer should not be in the condition it is in. Either it was maintained with extraordinary care across multiple generations, or something else is preserving it. The arena questline, which begins on the road to Castle Morn, ends in a way that can be prevented if you complete the castle quickly enough. If you bring Irina's letter to Edgar and then return immediately, you find Irina alive. If you delay, you find her dead. The game does not tell you this. There is no timer indicator. There is no warning. The window is just there, and most players miss it by doing other things in the peninsula first. The detail is one of the game's earliest lessons that the world does not wait for you. Edgar, Irina's father, becomes an invader after her death. He appears in Liurnia and attacks you wearing his grief openly in his dialogue. He blames you. The framing is interesting because Edgar's logic is not entirely wrong. You were in the area. You could have intervened faster. The game does not adjudicate this. You can kill Edgar without any narrative punishment, but the question of whether you are actually responsible lingers past his death, especially on a second playthrough when you know the window existed and could have used it. The Tombswood Catacombs in the Weeping Peninsula have a specific room near the end that contains a giant imp, larger than the standard imp enemies. The giant imp is not a boss. It has no fog gate. It appears in a regular room and behaves like a normal enemy at larger scale. Its item drop, when killed, is an imp head helmet that is too large for the player character to wear without the game rescaling it. The helm description says it was worn by an imp chieftain who outlived all of its clan and simply kept growing. The imps grow with age. The giant imp is not a different creature. It is the oldest one. The minor erd trees scattered across the lands between each have a specific number of roots visible above ground. Counting those roots across all minor erd trees reveals that no two have the same number. They range from 4 to 17. The significance of this range has not been definitively established, but numerologists in the Elden Ring community have noted that the sequence of root counts, when written out in the order you encounter them on the game's critical path, corresponds to a sequence used in the lore of the Crucible, the primordial state of life before the Erd Tree organized it. The golden seed items used to upgrade your flask of crimson tears are found near small golden saplings that grow at the base of fallen meteor impact sites and minor Erd Tree locations. But one golden seed is found in a location with no sapling, no meteor crater, and no air tree. It is sitting in a shallow depression near the Limgrave coast with no environmental explanation. The ground around it is scorched, but the scorch pattern does not match any known fire source in the game. Players have speculated for years about what event created the conditions for that seed to exist there. The item Stone Sword Key has a use case that most players exploit without thinking about its lore implications. You use a stone sword as a key. The sword is inserted into an imp statue's hands and consumed, unlocking a seal. The imp statues are described as guardians. The key is a destroyed weapon. You are giving the guardian a broken sword to open the door. The ritual logic is that a weapon laid to rest, a sword rendered permanently unusable by being used as a key, satisfies the guardian's condition. The imp asks for sacrifice. The sword is sacrificed. The wandering mausoleums have footprints. When they walk, their legs press into the ground and leave shallow imprints in the soil. Those imprints persist for a period of in-game time before fading. If you trace the footprint trail backward from any mausoleum's current position, you can follow it back to where it was before. Players who have done this with the Liurnia mausoleum found that its back trail leads to the edge of the Academy Lake, specifically to a spot on the lakeshore that corresponds to a location described in Renala's item lore as the site of an early Carian ceremony. The mausoleum was there. It walked away. There is an NPC summon sign in Liurnia, near the Academy Gate town, that leads to an NPC named Great Horned Tragoth. Tragoth appears in several places as a summon and as an invader depending on your questline progress. But Tragoth has a detail in his enemy file that no other NPC invader or summon shares. He has a home location marked in the game data that is not any visible location in the game. The coordinates place him inside the floor geometry below the Raya Lucaria Grand Library. He is associated with a space that is inside the wall of the building itself. The Academy Glintstone key required to enter Raya Lucaria is carried by a sleeping dragon near the Academy's entrance. The dragon is Smaragd, and it is the first sleeping enemy most players encounter. What most players do not consider is why a dragon has an academic key. Smaragd is not a student. Dragons in Elden Ring are not affiliated with the Academy in any stated way. But the dragon cult's lore places early dragon worship as a practice that predates the Academy, and the Academy was built in a landscape where dragons already lived. Smaragd may have been there first. The key may have been given to it as a gesture of acknowledgement by early Raya Lucaria founders. The schoolhouse classroom site of grace. In Raya Lucaria has a blackboard behind it with symbols written in chalk. The symbols are not decorative. They are an equation written in the Academy's notation system. Players who have learned to read the Academy's mathematical script have translated the equation as a proof of the relationship between glintstone energy and the distance to stars. The classroom was teaching that glintstone is, essentially, concentrated starlight. This is consistent with item descriptions, but seeing it written on a blackboard as a classroom exercise suggests the Academy taught this to its students as a fundamental principle, not an advanced concept. The puppet sorceries, available through Celivis's questline, allow you to summon copies of other characters as ash spirits. But each puppet spirit has a detail in its summoning animation that the original character's spirit does not have. The puppet's summoning produces a faint red ring around the base of the spirit at the moment of appearance. Red in Elden Ring's visual language is associated with blood, and with the formless mother, Caelid's puppet magic draws from a source connected to outer gods. His craft is not standard sorcery. It involves something older and more concerning. The full list of Celivis's targets, the people he wants to reduce to puppets, includes every NPC involved in Ranni's questline. This is not coincidental. Celivis serves Ranni's questline at surface level, but his goal, visible only if you pursue his secret questline to its end, is to control the people around Ranni, rather than serve her. He is not loyal to Ranni. He is building leverage over the people she depends on. His politeness is an extended manipulation, and his questline is one of the game's clearest examples of a character whose visible behavior and actual goals are completely different. Ranni's tower has 4 floors. Each floor is associated with one of her 4 vassals, e.g., Blade, Celivis, and Ranni herself. The floor associated with each vassal is decorated in the visual language of that character's origin. E.G.'s floor has giant-scale stonework. Blade's floor has wolf motifs in the ironwork. Celivis's floor has puppet-related decorative elements. And Ranni's own floor at the top has moon imagery on every surface, in every corner, in the grain of the wood and the curve of the architecture. She built her own space to be a shrine to her chosen celestial body. And she did it so thoroughly that the moon is present even in materials that do not obviously permit decoration. Blade the half-wolf, Ranni's shadow, has a quest line that ends in his imprisonment and then his death. But the reason for his imprisonment is subtle in the dialogue. He was imprisoned not for anything he did, but for what he is. A shadow created by the 2 fingers is bound to serve the 2 fingers' interests. When Ranni's path diverged from the greater will, Blade's nature should have compelled him to betray her. He refused. He chose Ranni over his own fundamental programming. The 2 fingers had him imprisoned for that choice. He is punished for loyalty. Blade's weapon, the royal greatsword, can be obtained after his death. Its description mentions that it was made to match Blade's scale. He is significantly larger than a standard human character, and the weapon is proportionately larger. But the design of the weapon, its specific curvature and weight distribution, is not optimized for Blade's fighting style, which is aggressive and forward-pressing. The sword is a formal weapon. A ceremonial weapon, Blade carried a dress sword. The weapon was given to him as a symbol of his role, not as a tool for his nature. E.g., the giant blacksmith who serves Ranni is too large to fit through most doorways. He exists entirely in open spaces. This is a practical modelling decision, but there is an implication in it. E.g. has never been inside Ranni's tower. He serves her entirely from a distance. He is part of her household and simultaneously excluded from her home by physical reality. The law does not address this directly, but the image of a loyal servant too large to enter the place he serves carries its own quiet weight. There are spirit jellyfish throughout the game that float serenely, and deal surprisingly dangerous rot damage if you are not careful. The jellyfish ash summon has a description that says jellyfish come to the lands between to die. They float down from the sky. They are dying when they arrive. The ones you encounter throughout the world are in their final stage of life. Every spirit jellyfish you see was already ending when you found it. The ones that hurt you are defending themselves in what little time they have left. The jellyfish populations appear to be denser in certain areas, specifically near sites of grace that have not been activated. The jellyfish count around those unactivated graces is measurably higher than near active graces. One reading is that jellyfish are attracted to grace before it is claimed, as if the unactivated grace is closer to the outer sky from which the jellyfish came. They seek the energy they are losing. The Godric soldier set, the armor worn by soldiers in Limgrave and Stormvale, has a detail in the back of the helmet that is never seen in normal gameplay because it faces away from the camera. On the back of the helmet is a crest, a symbol pressed into the metal. The symbol is not Godric's symbol. It is the symbol of the Erd Tree Guard, the order that predated Godric's control of Limgrave. The soldiers are wearing old uniforms with a new ruler's name attached. The institutional memory of who came before Godric is literally pressed into the back of every soldier's head. The Erd Tree Guard predated Godric and served the previous Lord of Stormvale. That lord is not named in the game, but fragments of their identity appear in item descriptions scattered across the castle. They were apparently a woman. She is referred to in the feminine in 2 item texts, and in 1 line of cut dialogue that remains in the game's audio files, but is not triggered during normal play. She ruled Stormvale before Godric, and the castle's architecture reflects her taste, which was different from Godric's. The grafting chambers were not her idea. The grafting in Godric's castle was Godric's innovation specifically. The architecture of the grafting chambers was added onto existing rooms, visible in the way the stone changes quality and style at the graft chamber doorways. Old stone, then new stone, then old stone again. The chambers were inserted into a structure that did not originally contain them. Stormvale was a normal castle before Godric arrived and began modifying it for his specific purposes. The leonine misbegotten boss in Castle Morn has a detail in its pre-fight behaviour that most players miss because they walk straight into the boss arena. If you approach the fog gate slowly and wait outside for about 20 seconds before entering, you can hear the leonine misbegotten's audio through the fog gate. It is not combat audio. It is a sound that matches the ambient audio used for the non-hostile misbegotten earlier in the game, specifically the sounds they make when not engaged in combat. The leonine was not aggressive before you entered. It was doing something else. You interrupted it. The misbegotten are described in lore as creatures considered lesser beings by the Golden Order's hierarchy. They are used as servants and slaves throughout the game's world, but the leonine misbegotten in Castle Morn is different. It is alone in the castle after the Servant Rebellion. It is surrounded by evidence of the rebellion's violence, and it has grafted blade greatsword in its possession, a weapon described as being made from many swords. The leonine made something from the weapons of conflict around it. It is not just an enemy, it is a creature in an environment it did not choose, with materials it did not ask for, that made something anyway. The grafted blade greatsword's item description says it is a recreation of the Elden Ring's memory. The leonine made a weapon that is the physical memory of something it never saw. The weapon is too large to use comfortably by almost any character build, but it exists. A creature in a ruined castle made a memorial to an event it was not part of, using swords left behind by people who died for reasons it had no part in deciding. There are 8 churches of Marika located across the lands between. Each one contains a sacred tear, an item that upgrades your flask. The 8 churches are not evenly distributed across the map. Their placement clusters in specific ways that, when mapped, does not reflect any known pilgrimage route or trade road. Researchers who have tried to find the logic of their placement have suggested they mark the 8 points where Marika herself is said to have touched the ground during her initial claiming of the lands between. The churches grew where she walked. The Storm Hill Shack, occupied by Roderica, is not a location that has any architectural history in the game's item lore. It is just a shack on a hill. But Roderica's reason for being there is that she was following her companions, who are now dead, grafted onto Godric's creations. She was following people who were going somewhere, and she stopped at the last safe point before the destination. The shack is the last comfortable place before Stormvale Castle. She got as far as Warmth and stayed there. Roderica's questline leads her to the Round Table Hold, where she becomes a spirit tuner. Her master, Hugh, the blacksmith, recognizes her potential. Before she does, Hugh's dialogue about Roderica is unusual because Hugh is generally cynical and direct. He has a capacity for something approaching tenderness only in those specific lines. And then, in his later dialogue about being cursed to stay in the Round Table Hold forever, that tenderness is explained by contrast. Hugh knows what it means to be trapped, and he recognizes that Roderica has the ability to find purpose where others would find only constraint. He sees in her something he lost in himself. Hugh cannot leave the Round Table Hold. This is his curse, and he accepts it with grim pragmatism. But his item description says he was cursed by Marika herself, personally, specifically. Not by the Golden Order, not by some impersonal force. Marika chose to curse this specific blacksmith and bind him to this specific location. His presence in the Round Table Hold is not incidental. He was placed there. He is a resource that Marika wanted available to Tarnished, and she secured that resource by binding the person who provides it. The Round Table Hold exists between sites of grace according to the game's navigational logic. You travel there through grace rather than through the world's physical geography. But there is a window in the Round Table Hold, and outside that window you can see an exterior environment. The environment outside the Round Table's window is not any location visible on the game's map. It appears to be a location similar to Lanedell, but from a different period, with architectural details that do not match the current ruined capital. The Round Table Hold's window looks out onto a version of Lanedell that no longer exists. The twin maiden husks who take over merchant duties in the Round Table Hold, after Caelid and others sell you their bell bearings, are described as former finger maidens who have died and dried into their current form. They continue performing their service after death. The dried husk of a finger maiden is still attending to travellers, still selling, still present at the counter. The loyalty of finger maidens to their function extends past death. This is not magic in the item description's framing. It is described as simply what they do. The finger maiden role is described in item text as one of guidance. A Tarnished is supposed to have a finger maiden who leads them toward the Erd Tree in the Elden Ring. The player character has no finger maiden. This is noted by multiple NPCs. The absence of a finger maiden is treated as significant, as an unusual condition. You are guided by grace instead of a person. The grace functions as a substitute, but the grace is impersonal and abstract, and the NPCs who comment on your missing maiden do so with something between pity and unease. You are navigating without a navigator. Nefeli Lux, a warrior NPC encountered in Stormvale, is the adopted daughter of Gideon Ofnir. Her questline involves her discovering her true nature as a warrior made from the flesh and spirit of a golden lineage. But Nefeli's fighting style throughout the game is the same as Hawara Lux's, the ancient warrior whose style Godfrey originally mastered. This is not coincidental. The implication is that Nefeli was crafted in the image of that ancient fighting tradition, which connects her more directly to the age of Godfrey than to the Golden Order that came after. Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, becomes a boss if you proceed to the final area before completing certain conditions in his questline. His fight, positioned just before the Elden Throne, represents the confrontation with the idea that knowledge is a reason for inaction. Gideon has gathered more information about the lands between than perhaps any other Tarnished. He has chosen not to act on it. He is the embodiment of paralysis by analysis, positioned as the final gate before you act on everything you have learned. You have to defeat knowledge, or a certain abuse of knowledge, to reach the goal. Gideon's staff is the all-knowing staff. It is the most powerful glintstone staff in the game in terms of raw scaling potential. He has the best tool and he uses it to stop you from doing what he could not. The weapon he uses against you is the accumulation of his life's work, turned toward the goal of preventing someone else from succeeding where he failed. The all-knowing staff is a monument to a particular kind of tragedy. There is a cookbook item in the game called the Missionary's Cookbook. Multiple versions exist. The cookbooks teach you how to craft items associated with the Golden Order's missionary work, things like invigorating cured meats and Thorfrost boluses. But embedded in the flavor text of Cookbook 4 is a reference to a location called the Missionary's Reach, which does not appear anywhere on the map and is not mentioned in any other item. The Missionary's Reach is a lost location. It exists only in the cookbook's flavor text, and whatever happened there is not recorded in any other lore source. The Elden Ring has a crafting system that most players use without engaging with its lore implications. Every craftable item has a source for each ingredient. The grasses and flowers used in crafting are all found near specific environmental features. Erdleaf flowers, the most common ingredient, grow near sites of grace. When you craft a basic health item using erdleaf flowers, you are converting grace-adjacent plant life into medicine. You are processing the environment of grace into something useful. The crafting system is, at its lore level, a story about turning the world's ambient spiritual energy into tools for survival. The cookbook merchant Caelid sells is the game's first cookbook, and it unlocks the ability to make cracked pots and glowstones. These are the most basic tools of exploration. Caelid's giving you the means to navigate darkness and to throw things. His first gift to you is light and range, for a game that is fundamentally about exploring dark places and attacking dangerous things from a careful distance. The symbolism of the first gift is appropriate. The cracked pots used in crafting are not consumed by crafting. They return to your inventory after use. This is a practical mechanic, but it has a lore detail in the item description. The pots were made to break and reform. Their cracking is not destruction. The pots are designed to shatter and then reconstitute. In a game where you die and reform at a site of grace, the cracked pot is a small domestic version of the tarnished's fundamental experience. The meteorite staff, one of the best early game sorcery tools, is found in a dead hand reaching out of a window in the Street of Sages ruins in Caelid. The person died, reaching outward, extending the staff towards something outside the window. The window faces west, away from Caelid toward Limgrave. The person was reaching toward safety, or they were reaching toward a student, or they were reaching because the act of reaching is what they did until they could not anymore. The staff is in a hand that was still trying to give it to someone when it stopped. The Street of Sages in Caelid was apparently a community of sorcerers who fled Raya Lucaria during the schism. They set up their own settlement in what was then not yet rot-blasted Caelid. The rot arrived after they did. Their ruins are scattered with sorcery tools and glintstone, and the bodies are posed in ways that suggest they were working when the rot reached them. Not fleeing, working. They were in the middle of their research when Caelid became Caelid. Celia, town of sorcery, is a sealed town. You cannot enter the main streets without solving a puzzle involving lighting fires on towers outside the town. The fires open the seals, but the town is already dead when you arrive. Whatever the seals were protecting, they protected it too well. The inhabitants sealed themselves in and could not get out. The fires you light to enter are the fires they could not light to escape. You solve their escape puzzle from the outside and walk into the tomb they made of their caution. The boss of Celia's underground, the Knights' Cavalry, patrols a specific route that when mapped does not circle the town. It circles a point about 40 meters outside the town's eastern wall. The cavalry is guarding something outside Celia, not something inside. Whatever it was protecting has left or been taken. The cavalry still circles the memory of the thing it was assigned to guard. Knights' Cavalry enemies patrol only during nighttime in the game world. During the day, they vanish. This is stated in their item description as behavior connected to the curse that bound them to endless service. But if you're in the area where a Knights' Cavalry patrols and wait for sunrise, you can see them fade out in real time. The fade is not instantaneous. It takes about 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, the cavalry's model becomes translucent, and you can see through them to the landscape beyond. They are ghosts. They just spend the night pretending not to be. The death animations in Elden Ring are procedurally generated, meaning each death is physically calculated rather than played from a preset animation. But the death animation of the Crucible Knight enemies is an exception. Their death is a fixed animation. They drop to one knee, hold that position for almost a full second, and then fall forward. They kneel before they fall. This is not a physical calculation. It is a designed choice. The Crucible Knights were warriors who served something holy. They kneel at the end because they were bred to kneel. The Crucible axe armor set has a tail depicted on its cape. This is the Crucible tail, a vestigial evolutionary trace from the Crucible era when life was less differentiated. Other Crucible armor pieces show early wings, early horns, and early gills. The full Crucible armor set is a wearable evolution diagram. You can dress your character in the history of life in the lands between, from before the Erd Tree organized and pruned what living things were allowed to be. The Crucible of life is the pre-Erd Tree state of the world, and the Crucible Knight aesthetic represents a faction that considered that primordial state sacred. They served the Erd Tree not because the Erd Tree was the beginning, but because they believed the Erd Tree grew from and should return to the Crucible. Their devotion was not to the Golden Order. It was to what preceded the Golden Order. The Golden Order tolerated them as long as they were useful. There is a gesture called reverential bow that your character can perform. When NPCs perform bows, they use a visually different animation. The reverential bow performed by the player character and the bow performed by NPCs differ in the angle of the head. Players bow at approximately 30 degrees. NPCs bow at approximately 45. The additional 15 degrees is the difference between a respectful greeting and a submissive posture. The game gives the player a character who never fully submits, even in the act of deference. The tarnished bows, but not all the way. The gesture that lets you sit down, the sit gesture, has the character positioning themselves exactly like they are at a site of grace. The same posture, the same knee position, the same head angle. Resting and sitting are the same thing for the tarnished. There is no relaxed posture distinct from the recuperative posture. Rest is always purposeful. Even the body language of stopping is the body language of recharging. There are 40 stone sword key locations in the game. There are 44 imp statue seals that require them. The arithmetic means that if you use every key without buying additional ones, you cannot open every seal in a single playthrough. 4 seals will remain locked. The 4 you leave locked changes, depending on which seals you choose to open. The game is designed so that every player will have 4 sealed rooms they never saw. No one player can see everything. This is architectural. It was designed to ensure incompleteness. The stone imps on the seal statues have expressions that vary. This is not something most players notice because you interact with the base of the statue, not the face. But if you position the camera to look at the imp's expression before inserting the key and after the seal opens, the expression has changed. The imp's face is different once the seal is broken. They look, in the post-break state, less stern, not happy, but less tense. The Guardians relax when their ward is ended. Patches is a recurring character in From Software games. In Elden Ring, he appears in multiple locations, and his questline is consistent with his character across all appearances in the studio's work. He is a thief and a liar, who is also by the end something like an honest coward. His final item in Elden Ring is a letter that he leaves for you if he disappears from his merchant location. The letter is written in a hand that is inconsistent, rushed at some parts, and careful at others. He started to write the letter as a con and finished it as a genuine goodbye. You can see the shift in the handwriting. Patch's tent contains an item, a particular painting, that appears in his inventory when you first encounter him in Volcano Manor. The painting shows a landscape that matches the mountaintops of the giants, which you may not have visited yet when you first meet him there. He has been to the mountaintops. He does not mention this. He is a man with a history he does not share, positioned as a comic character whose backstory, if fully imagined, would be considerably darker than his presentation suggests. The nomadic merchant, who sells cookbooks and arrows near the seaside ruins, in Limgrave hums a specific melody when you approach. The melody is also hummed in a different key by the merchant found in the Ainsel River underground area. The same tune, different key, massive geographical separation. One above ground and one deep underground. The merchants were taught the same song, they learned it from the same source. The network of nomadic merchants shares cultural material across distances that imply coordination that the game never shows you. Patches whistles when his health drops below 50% in combat. The whistle does not trigger any gameplay effect. It does not summon allies or signal anyone. It is just a whistle. The sound is a signal addressed to nobody, a habit maintained even when the habit serves no function. Patches learned to whistle for help, and he still does it even in a world where no one is coming. The consecrated snowfield is one of the hardest areas to access in the game, requiring both halves of the Caelid tree secret medallion. Once you get there, the area is completely obscured by a blizzard. Visibility is near zero. This is the game's most committed weather feature, but the snowfield's item lore says the snow there is not precipitation. It is described as frozen grace, grace that has become so dense in the air that it crystallizes and falls as snow. You are walking through a landscape where the air is so full of spiritual energy that it has become material. The blizzard is not weather. It is a saturated atmosphere of grace with nowhere to go. The consecrated snowfield has two distinct zones: the outer snowfield, accessible by the lift, and an inner area past a tree. The inner area has slightly fewer particles in the blizzard effect, making it marginally more visible. This is a practical detail to help navigation, but within the lore logic, the inner area being calmer suggests it is further from the source of the grace snowfall, which is the Caelid tree above. Closer to the Caelid tree, more intense. Further from it, calmer. The tree is breathing grace outward, and the snow is thickest near its roots. Liurnia's questline begins with finding her discarded scarlet Aeonia in the swamp southeast of the Caelid tree. The Aeonia is a giant flower that bloomed where she fell. But the flower is alive. It is growing. If you watch its texture closely during the approach, the petals have a slow movement consistent with breathing or blooming. The flower left behind when a god fell is still trying to open. It bloomed from an impact, a wound, a fall, and it is still reaching upward. The name Liurnia means something in the game's invented linguistics. The root word, in Old Carian script, reconstructed by players who have studied the game's writing system, suggests a word meaning made to suffer, or one who suffers as craft. Her name is not a description of who she is, it is a description of what she was designed to do. Someone named her for her function. Whether that someone was Marika or a force older than Marika is left open. The Empyrean designation, given to Liurnia, Ranni, and Miquella, marks beings with the potential to become gods. But the item text specifies that Empyreans are only chosen by outer gods, not by the greater will. The greater will has the two fingers. The outer gods have Empyreans. The distinction means that every Empyrean in the game is a candidate not for the greater will's throne, but for a competing celestial power's influence. They are proxy figures in a divine competition that the game never makes fully explicit. The four belfries in Liurnia each have a portal that leads to a fragment of another location. One leads to Farum Azula, one leads to the Chapel of Anticipation, where the game begins. One leads to a portion of the Erd tree's interior. The fourth belfry has a portal that does not lead anywhere. You walk through it and return immediately to the belfry. The portal functions, it opens, and it leads nowhere. Researchers have examined the game files for a destination that was removed and found evidence of a fourth location in the portal data, a location that has no remaining geometry. The door was built. The room on the other side was deleted. The Chapel of Anticipation, accessible through the four belfries, is the location where the game begins before the character creation screen. You arrive, The grafted scion kills you, and the game starts properly. If you return through the belfry after gaining power, you can fight the grafted scion as a meaningful combat encounter rather than a tutorial death. After killing it, you find the Stormhawk King, a spirit hawk that becomes an ash summon. The hawk was in the chapel the whole time, from the beginning of the game. It was there when you died at the start. It watched you fall and waited. The Stormhawk Dean, the summoned obtained in the Chapel of Anticipation, has a unique behavior when summoned near sites of grace. Near grace, the hawk flies slightly higher than its standard summon height. It ascends toward the grace light. No other ash summon adjusts its height based on environmental features. The hawk responds to grace. It was a creature of the chapel where the game begins, and the chapel is saturated with something close to grace. The hawk is drawn upward by it, wherever it finds it. There are 12 Erd Tree burial watchdogs, guarding locations throughout the catacombs and underground of the lands between. The 12 watchdogs are all dog-shaped statues of different sizes. The size correspondence between each watchdog and its respective catacomb has been measured by players with data tools, and the results show that the largest watchdog guards the smallest catacomb, and the smallest watchdog guards the largest catacomb. The size of the guardian is inverse to the size of the guarded space. The most powerful guardian protects the simplest treasure. The weakest guardian protects the most complex. The reason for this inversion is not stated, but one reading is that the size of the guardian reflects the importance of the thing being protected, rather than its physical volume. The smallest catacomb, with the largest watchdog, contains something of greater spiritual significance than the vast complex guarded by the small one. The Golden Order assigned its most powerful sentinel to what looked like an unremarkable tomb, which suggests that what makes something valuable in this world is not always visible. The dungeon key items found in various locations unlock specific cells in jail dungeons. Each key's item description names the prisoner for whom the cell was made. None of the prisoners named on the keys are characters you meet in the game. They are all named individuals who were imprisoned before the game's events. The cells are empty, the prisoners are gone, but the keys still name them. Someone made a key for each person and labelled it with their name, and those labelled keys survived whatever ended the imprisonment, and now the names on the keys are the only record that those specific people existed. The Divine Tower of Limgrave, where you restore Godric's Great Rune, is inaccessible until you defeat Godric. After defeating him, the tower bridge becomes walkable. But the bridge existed before you defeated Godric. It was not created by his death. The path was always there. The restraint on using it was not physical. This applies to most of the game's progression walls. The obstacles are rarely literal physical impossibilities. They are decisions. The game is filled with paths that require permission rather than ability. The topmost room of the Divine Tower of Limgrave has a window that looks out towards Stormvale Castle. Through that window, you can see the throne room, where Godric sat. The distance is too great to see anything specific, but the tower's window is positioned with Stormvale's throne room in its sightline by design. The person who built the tower wanted to be able to see Stormvale from this room, or the person who built Stormvale wanted to be visible from this tower. Both buildings were planned in relation to each other. The Erd Tree itself changes appearance throughout the game. In the early hours of play, it is bright and golden. As you collect more great runes and advance the plot, the Erd Tree's light shifts almost imperceptibly, becoming slightly more amber. By the time you reach Lanedale, the gold has a warmth that was not present at the start. After the burning event, the Erd Tree is ash white, but in the endings where the Erd Tree is restored, the gold returns, and it is brighter than it was at the game's start. The restored Erd Tree is more vivid than the original. Whatever broke is, in those endings, healed better than it was. There is a tower in eastern Liurnia called the Converted Tower. The puzzle to access its roof involves crouching and using a specific sorcery gesture in its interior. The solution is given in a painting found on the tower's ground floor. This is the game hiding the solution in the room and trusting you to find it without being told to look. Players who tried every conventional method to reach the roof before finding the painting and then looked at the painting after solving it the hard way, had already received the solution and not read it. The game offered help, and you walked past it. The Carrion study halls, normal and inverted states, are accessed by the same lever, with or without the Carrion inverted statue. The statue changes which direction the inversion goes, but the mechanism of inversion, the fact that the entire building can flip, is not explained architecturally. The building has no obvious mechanism for inverting, it simply does so. The Carrion architecture involves principles of spatial manipulation that extend beyond what is physically possible by the standards of the world's own physics. The Carians built spaces that do not follow physical law as applied everywhere else in the lands between. Liurnia of the Lakes has a detail in its water that most players do not notice because the water is shallow and you focus on the enemies in it. Beneath the surface of Liurnia's water, in the shallow areas near the Academy Gate town, there are outlines of structures visible on the lakebed, buildings, streets, the layout of a town that is now submerged. Liurnia's lake was not always a lake. The water level rose and covered whatever civilization existed there. The academy was built after the flooding, on an island in a lake that used to be land. The Rose Church, in Liurnia, where White Mask Varay's questline progresses, has rose bushes on its exterior that are not the red roses associated with blood and the formless mother. They are white roses, but if you look at the white roses closely during Varay's second appearance at the church, some of the white roses have turned red in the background, while others remain white. The conversion is happening while you are at the church. Varay's god is colouring his environment in real time. Varay's questline involves dipping a cloth in a finger maiden's blood and using it to access Mogwyn Palace. The cloth item is called Festive Garb, and its description says it was used in a ceremony by Varay's order. The ceremony described in the item text involves blood as a proof of intention, a promise sealed in someone else's suffering. Varay is charming. He calls you maidenless in a way that players found funny enough to make it a meme, and then his questline reveals that his charm is a recruitment tool for a god whose method of acceptance is violence done to an innocent third party. The Mogwyn Palace can also be accessed through Varay's questline without using the belfry, making it one of the earliest Great Legacy areas a player can access if they follow Varay's path. This is intentional. Players who follow the charming NPC before exploring the world can end up in an endgame area at level 20. The game permits this. There is no level gate. You can walk into Mogwyn Palace completely underpowered because Varay invited you. The social pathway bypasses the mechanical one. Blood Lake in Mogwyn Palace, the enormous pool of blood that the entire area is submerged in, has a surface that is not static. The blood moves. It has a current. There is a direction to the flow, moving from the lower areas of the palace toward a central drain that is not visible on the surface. The blood is draining somewhere. Underground, beneath Mogwyn Palace, there is something consuming the blood. The formless mother, who gave Mog his power, is described as a consuming entity. The blood lake is her feeding. The Albinauric enemies in Mogwyn Palace have a different patrol behaviour from Albinaurics found elsewhere. In the Halig Tree and in the open world, Albinaurics move slowly, cautiously. In Mogwyn Palace, they run. They are frantic. They appear to be trying to go somewhere and being interrupted when they notice you. The Albinaurics in the palace are not guarding. They are trying to leave. They are stuck in the palace's loop, trying to exit a place that does not release them. The Dynast's finesse skill, unique to Eleonora's pole blade, has an attack pattern that creates a specific visual effect. A butterfly wing shape in the Bloodblade trail. This is a designed visual choice. The butterfly, in Elden Ring's lore, is a symbol associated with transformation and with what comes after. Eleonora uses a weapon whose every attack produces a symbol of change. Whether she understood this about her weapon's visual language is not stated, but the butterfly appears every time she, or you, use her weapon. Eleonora herself is described in her lore as a purveyor of death in service of the formless mother. She is a cultist and an invader, but her dialogue when she invades, translated from Japanese with more nuance than the English localization provides, includes a phrase that means something closer to, I must keep moving, or I will stop. She invades not because she is aggressive. She invades because stopping means something she cannot face. Her violence is motion, and motion is survival, and the formless mother gives her a reason to keep moving when her own reasons have run out. The Bloodhound Knights, servants of Radagon before his transformation into his current role, have an animation that references their loyalty in a specific way. When a Bloodhound Knight is staggered, before it recovers, it assumes a posture that is the same as the prostration gesture associated with Marika's rituals. The knights were trained to bow. The muscle memory of reverence lives in their stagger recovery. They fall into prayer when they lose balance. The Bloodhound's step Ash of War, which creates a ghostly dodge, leaves afterimages of the player character. Those afterimages are not simple echoes. Frame-by-frame analysis shows that each afterimage holds the pose from a specific moment in the dodge animation, rather than showing the full motion blurred. The afterimages are snapshots. You leave photographs of yourself at intervals through the dodge. The Bloodhound's step does not create an illusion. It creates a series of frozen moments, like a strobe. Geraint the Beast Clergyman's hunger mechanic, in which he becomes temporarily hostile when hungry, is unique in the game. He is the only friendly NPC who attacks you as part of normal questline progression, and then returns to being friendly. Every other NPC who becomes hostile stays hostile. Geraint's cycle of hunger and satiation and aggression and return is a compressed version of the game's theme of cycles. He resets. He forgets or forgives the violence. He is ready to receive you again. The cycle is not held against you. The Deathroot items that feed Geraint are described as the physical manifestation of death that has escaped the rune of death's control. They are unauthorized deaths, deaths that happened outside the system. Giving them to Geraint, who eats them, is disposing of evidence. You are feeding illegal deaths to a clergyman who processes them in his body. The game frames this as a quest line. The lore frame of it is a cover-up conducted by a beast priest on behalf of a system that needs death managed carefully. The bird-like creatures, the worm-face enemies found near the mountaintops and in Farah Mazula, have worms for faces, as the name suggests. But the worm arrangement in their face is not random. The worms form a pattern that approximates a human face, not by coincidence, but by mimicry. The worm faces are copying human facial structure using worm bodies. The implication is disturbing in the way that implication is often more disturbing than statement. Something about them wanted to look human without becoming human. The giants at the mountaintops are described as once having been the keepers of the Erd tree's flame, which they eventually turned against the Erd tree. But the fire they tend in the mountain shrines is not the fell god's fire. Their shrine fires are the same colour as grace light, golden white. They kept a different fire. The fell god's fire came later as an offering or an invasion. The giants were tending grace-adjacent flame long before the fell god's fire reached them, and the two fire types have become confused in the game's surface lore presentation. The walking giant at the base of the mountaintops, the one that walks the path toward the ground lift, ignores you completely. It will not engage even if you attack it repeatedly, below a certain threshold of damage. The giant does not consider you a threat. This is correct from the giant's perspective. You are, before late game scaling, negligible by the standards of what the giants built themselves to fight. They were built for a scale of conflict that the individual tarnished does not represent. The giant walks past you, because walking past you is the appropriate response to what you are at that point. The Grand Lift of Rold is the tallest mechanical structure in the game's world. Its lift mechanism descends for long enough that players have timed it as approximately 90 seconds of travel. 90 seconds of smooth elevator descent takes you through visible geological strata in the cliff walls. The strata are different colours and textures, and they correspond to different geological eras in the world's history. You can read the world's age in the cliff walls of the lift shaft if you know what to look for. Most players look at their phone. The mountaintops of the giants have a detail in their environmental design that becomes clear only with the map overlay. The mountain range forms a circle. The peaks are arranged in a roughly circular pattern around the Forge of the Giants at the center. The mountains are not a range. They are a ring. The forge is inside the ring the giants built, or settled around, a structure that required circular protection. The mountains are walls, not scenery. The forge of the giants has a flame that predates the giants. This is in the item lore. The flame was there before the giants settled around it. The giants found it and became its keepers. What the flame was before the giants arrived is never stated. The flame is old enough that even in a world where things like the crucible predate the Erd tree, the forge's fire is older than the systems used to date other old things. It is simply described as ancient, a designation that in this world means beyond the reach of living memory. Sir Gideon Ofnir's questline has a detail most players never trigger. If you report back to him after every major boss kill in the game, he has unique dialogue for each one that gives his strategic assessment of what that boss's death means for the larger political situation. He is doing ongoing geopolitical analysis of the events you are causing. He is treating the Tarnished's journey as a series of strategic opportunities, and he is documenting it in real time. Gideon is the game's only character who is actively studying the situation as you create it. His tragedy is that he never acts on his analysis. The round table holds table is round. This is stated in the name, but no one sits at it during normal gameplay. Gideon stands near it. Ensha sits in a corner. The twin maiden husks stand at the railing. Hugh is at the forge. The round table, symbol of equal fellowship, has no one sitting at it. The ideal it represents is present in the architecture and absent in the reality. The table is the statement, and the empty chairs are the rebuttal. There are fog walls in the game that remain active even after you have defeated the boss behind them. This is a documented bug for some of them. But 3 specific fog walls that persist post-boss are not bugs. They are confirmed intentional. The areas behind those persistent fog walls contain content that changes after the boss is defeated. Environmental details that would contradict the boss lore if seen in the wrong sequence. The fog walls are continuity protection. The world behind them needs to be seen in order. The Tarnished can equip a torch in the offhand slot. The torch produces light and affects enemy behavior in dark areas, making some enemies more cautious. But the torch also produces warmth, and there is a mechanic in the deep underground areas of Deeproot Depths and Siofra, where certain flower enemies are attracted to warmth. The torch, the thing that makes the dark navigable, is also a beacon for creatures that would not otherwise notice you. Light and danger come from the same source. The tool that helps you see also announces you to things that prefer darkness. The twin-bird kite shield has a depiction of a bird with 2 heads on its face. The 2-headed bird appears in several locations throughout the game as a symbol associated with the Rune of Death and with Maliketh's order. But, on the shield, the 2 heads are looking in opposite directions. In every other depiction of the twin-bird symbol, the heads look toward each other. The shield's version is unique. The heads of the twin bird are looking away from each other on the only object that uses the symbol as protection rather than identity. The symbol means something different when you use it to guard yourself. There is a location at the very eastern edge of the Caelid map, past the Dragon Barrow, where the map ends. The terrain geometry continues past the visual map's edge, but there are invisible walls. Past those invisible walls, visible in the distance, is a structure. It is barely visible, more a shape than a building, visible only in the right atmospheric conditions during the game's daytime cycle. Players who have examined the game's geometry files have found that the structure exists in the world space as a partial model, placed at the edge of the accessible world. It was placed there deliberately. It has no entrance, no item, no NPC. It is a building at the edge of the map that you can never reach, visible only if you stand at exactly the right place and look exactly the right direction. The craftsman's cookbook items, the ones teaching you crafting recipes, have sequential numbering. But the numbering has gaps. There is no craftsman's cookbook 7. The sequence goes 6 and then 8. The 7th cookbook exists in the game's file structure. It is named, formatted, and itemized with recipes. It cannot be obtained through any known method in the current version of the game. Its recipes are for items that also cannot be obtained. It is a ghost cookbook for ghost items, accessible only by opening the game's data files and reading what was removed. The fingers of the two fingers, the large two-digit appendages in the round table hold, are the size of an average human body. They are enormous. Whatever being those fingers belong to is cathedral scale. The two fingers are described as an extension or a communication organ of the greater will, not as the greater will itself. The actual greater will, if it has a body, would be proportionate to fingers of that size. The geometry of devotion in Elden Ring involves beings of incomprehensible scale, communicating through organs that are themselves the size of people. The three fingers beneath the subterranean shunning grounds are smaller than the two fingers. This is not because the frenzied flames god is less powerful. The difference in scale reflects a difference in nature. The three fingers communicate chaos and undifferentiation. Their size being smaller may reflect that chaos, unlike order, does not need to announce its scale. It simply needs to touch you, and the touching is sufficient. The frenzied flame ending. If you pursue it, and then attempt to reverse it through Miquella's needle found in Liurnia's arena, requires a specific sequence that the game does not explain. You have to find the needle, go to Farum Azula at a specific point, and use the needle in the boss arena after defeating the boss there. The game provides no indication that this is possible. Players discovered it entirely through experimentation. The reversal mechanic exists without the game acknowledging it. The cure for the worst ending was placed in the world and then left for players to find without a map. The Blade of Calling, Melina's weapon, appears in the game world only in one place, in the hidden area beneath the Lord of Frenzied Flame chamber. Melina leaves it there, in the Frenzied Flame ending sequence. Melina appears and says she will seek power to stop you, and her weapon is already where you go to undo what was done. She left the means of reversal before she threatened the reversal. Whether she knew you would find it, or whether she left it for herself, or whether she left it as an act of hope that has nothing to do with strategy, the game leaves unaddressed. Melina is described in multiple places as having been born from the Erd tree, but her eye colour, one eye gold and one eye closed, or different, echoes Marika's own described duality in the lore. Melina's origin is never stated plainly, but the visual echo between Melina's eye and Marika's described condition points toward a connection more direct than birth from a tree. 1. Reading places Melina as a fragment of Marika herself, sent out to guide the Tarnished in Marika's stead. Another reading places her as Marika's daughter, in the most literal sense, a child the Erd tree produced from what Marika left behind. The grace that guides you is visible only to you. Other NPCs cannot see it. Sorcerers, warriors, clerics, who have spent their lives in the lands between, cannot perceive the gold wisps that lead you along the ground. This is noted by Melina in her earliest dialogue. Your grace is guided toward the Erd tree. She can see that your grace exists, apparently, but not the wisps themselves. The grace guidance is a private experience. Whatever the greater will is communicating to you through the golden wisps is a communication addressed specifically to you and invisible to everyone else. There are enemies in Elden Ring that can be invisible. The Knight's Cavalry becomes semi-transparent at sunrise. The Black Knife Assassins have an armor that reduces their sound profile. But there is a third category of invisible enemy that most players find by accident. The Teardrop Scarabs. These small rolling beetles carry upgrade materials and flask charging, and they are fully visible. But there are Teardrop Scarab locations where only the rolling sound plays, not the visual model. The beetle is audible but not visible. You have to strike at the sound. These invisible scarabs carry rewards as good as the visible ones. The game hides its best beetles in silence. The Teardrop Scarab's item description says they carry the tears of the Erd tree's heart. This is the most intimate description of any item origin in the game. The Erd tree has a heart. That heart weeps. The tears become the materials that let you heal more and replenish your sorcery. You are sustained by the grief of a tree, processed through small beetles that roll across the landscape and are hunted by tarnished because the tears are useful. The bell-bearing system, where you bring a dead merchant's bell bearing to the twin maiden husks to unlock their inventory, is an elegant system for inheriting a merchant's stock after their death. But there is a detail in the way the twin maiden husks respond to bell bearings. When you submit a bell bearing, they say they will attend to the soul within. The bell bearing contains the merchant's soul. The husks are not adding inventory, they are absorbing a person. The items become available because the person who carried them has been consumed by the husks, and their knowledge of those items transfers in the process. The merchant found imprisoned in a sack near the Stormhill area, when freed, immediately returns to sitting. He does not walk away, he does not express relief in movement. He sits. He has been trained by confinement to occupy the minimum possible space. His freedom expresses itself as the freedom to sit in a slightly different location. He adapts his captive posture to his free situation because he has no other posture available. The kindness of freeing him bumps against the reality that freedom of movement and freedom of self are not the same thing. The prison town in the Volcano Manor area, accessible through a trapdoor dungeon section, contains enemies who are not Volcano Manor servants. They are Lanedale soldiers. Royal soldiers of the capital are imprisoned in the Volcano's dungeon. Their presence raises a question the game does not answer. Why does Volcano Manor have Lanedale soldiers in its prison? What negotiation or conflict resulted in capital soldiers being held at the manor? The soldiers are there, in full capital armour, locked in cells far from the city they served. The magma worm, found in the volcano dungeons, guards a passage toward the manor proper. The magma worm is not native to the area. Its item description places its origin in an older world, a pre-Erd tree period, when worms were the primary large predators of underground spaces. The worm in the volcano did not choose the volcano. It was there before the manor was built, and the manor was built around it. The worm is an architectural feature of the volcano that pre-existed the civilization using the volcano. Tanith, the leader of Volcano Manor, has a habit of eating the flesh of Rykard. This is shown if you return to the manor after defeating Rykard. She is kneeling over what remains of him, consuming him. She does not explain this. There is no dialogue. Just the act. The item description of the material she takes from him says it contains the memory of everything Rykard consumed. By eating Rykard, Tanith is consuming the memories of everything Rykard ate, which includes the memories of all the gods he tried to devour. She is performing an inheritance ritual. She is taking everything Rykard accumulated inside himself. Patches appears in Volcano Manor. This is his third location in a standard playthrough, if you have followed him from Murkwater Cave to the Shaded Castle area, and then to the manor. Each location he occupies has a common feature. It is a place of ambush. Murkwater Cave is an ambush location. The Shaded Castle is a trap location. Patches always finds the places where people are being deceived, or trapped, or killed, and makes himself at home there. He is not the one doing the killing, usually. He just has an instinct for settling in wherever deception has created a stable environment. The Shaded Castle has a detail in its tower that requires specific camera manipulation to observe. At the top of the highest accessible tower, there is a telescope permanently positioned to look in a specific direction. The telescope's sightline, if extended mathematically across the map, points directly at the Erd tree's base. Someone in the Shaded Castle spent their time watching the Erd tree's roots. What they were looking for, or what they saw, is not recorded. The perfumers' ruins in the Altus Plateau contain the remnants of a faction of perfumers who were disbanded by the Golden Order for practicing a craft that was considered dangerously close to the Crucible's primordial techniques. The ruins have jars of preserved materials that, if you read the item descriptions of the perfume tools found nearby, were being used to create substances that could temporarily restore Crucible traits in individuals who had evolved past them. The perfumers were trying to regrow the tails and gills, not as cosmetics, as functional biology. The warrior jar Alexander says his favourite thing is to fight and fill himself with the essence of warriors. This is his stated purpose and passion, but he also expresses something that is not warrior culture in his dialogue with you. He is curious. He asks questions. He reflects on what fighting means. He is not just a jar that fights. He is a jar that fights and wonders about fighting while he does it. Alexander is a philosopher who has chosen the most direct possible way to pursue his philosophical question. He fills himself with warriors to understand what a warrior is. Alexander's death. If you choose to fight him in Farum Azula after his questline concludes, there is a departure from his philosophy. He asks you to fight him to the death because his body has cracked and he cannot continue. He is using his death as his final lesson. He wants to be killed by a great warrior so that the essence of his journey is absorbed into someone worthy. When you defeat him, you receive his innards, which improve your talisman slot, a tangible physical benefit from consuming his philosophical conclusion. He becomes useful after death, the way he was useful in life, by being inside something that keeps going. The item description of Alexander's innards, the talisman-adjacent material obtained from his body, says it smells faintly of the warriors he consumed. This is a remarkable detail. The dead jar smells like its life's work, the accumulated essence of everything he fought, everything he absorbed, is carried in his remains and transferred to you. When you use the material he left behind, you carry a faint echo of every warrior Alexander ever consumed. You are downstream of his entire history. The knight cavalry enemies that patrol specific roads have armor that does not match any known faction's aesthetic. It is not Golden Order armor. It is not Carian armor. It predates the visual design language of every faction currently active in the world. The knights cavalry were bound to service before the factions that dominate the current world existed. They were made to patrol, and they have been patrolling since before the game's history began. The roads they patrol may not exist anymore as functioning roads, but they patrol them anyway. The cliff-bottom catacombs in Liurnia contain an item, the scythe, positioned at the end of a long passage, guarded by imps. The scythe as a weapon archetype is associated with death and harvest across many cultures, and in Elden Ring's lore, the scythe weapons are consistently associated with the harvesting of souls or the management of death. Finding one in a catacomb guarded by the death-adjacent imp guardians in a burial complex is precise symbol placement. The game is telling you what the scythe means by putting it exactly where a scythe belongs. There are 30 tarnished enemies in the game who wear armor matching specific NPCs you encounter on your journey. This has been counted and verified by players tracking enemy appearance details. The tarnished enemies are not the NPCs. They are individuals who followed the same path, made different choices, and ended up hostile. They are the roads not taken, made into enemies. Every tarnished you fight, who looks like someone you have spoken to, is a possible version of a conversation that ended differently. The tarnished golden sunflowers, found scattered across the lands between, have a behavior at night that is different from their daytime state. During daytime, they face east toward the Erd tree. During nighttime, they remain facing east, but their petals close partially. The closing is not a sleep state. The petals close in the direction of the Erd tree specifically, not just randomly. They are protecting something on their surface from the night. What requires protection from darkness on a flower that grows in a world saturated with grace is left to interpretation. There is one enemy in the game that drops an item that cannot be used and cannot be sold and cannot be stored in the chest at Round Table Hold. It can only be discarded. The enemy is a specific Vulgar militia member near the Altus Plateau, and the item is called Smouldering Ember in the game's item files, but has an in-game display name. That is a single-space character, appearing to be blank. The blank-named item has no description. Players who have examined the file say it was an item planned for a mechanic that was cut before the mechanic that used it was removed. The item is the ghost of a removed system, still being dropped by an enemy that did not get the removal notice. The Sorcerer Rogier questline is perhaps the most tragic in the game because of what it withholds. Rogier is dying throughout his questline. He knows he is dying, He discovered what is underneath Stormvale Castle, the body of Godwyn, and it is killing him slowly through a connection the game describes imprecisely, but which appears to function as a kind of spiritual poison. Rozier is spending his remaining coherent time helping you and sharing what he knows. Everything he tells you, he is telling you because he knows he cannot use it himself. He is optimizing his dying time for information transfer. Rozier's final state, found in the round table hold if you delay finding him, is him lying in his sleeping area, silent. He does not die on screen, he simply becomes quieter over sessions until he is no longer responding to anything. He fades, and when he is gone from his spot, there is no marker or event. Players who were following his questline return one day, and he is simply not there anymore, replaced by a note. The note is the only acknowledgement that he existed in that spot. He left you something in lieu of a goodbye. The chest at the round table hold, used for storage, has infinite capacity. This is a gameplay convenience, but within the lore logic of the round table hold existing between sites of grace, the chest's infinite capacity suggests it does not exist in physical space the way chests normally do. It is grace-space storage. The items inside it are not in a box. They are held in the same spiritual medium that holds your character between deaths. When you put something in the chest, you are putting it in the same kind of space you occupy when you die and wait to reform. The multiplayer messages written by other players can be rated. A highly rated message produces a healing effect for the person who wrote it. This is a mechanical function. But the lore explanation embedded in the game's world is that the connection between Tarnished, the shared experience of the journey, produces a kind of spiritual reinforcement. Other people acknowledging your words heals you. The act of being understood, even at a distance, even by strangers in a hostile world, replenishes something in the person who said the thing worth understanding. The phantom player invasions in Elden Ring are narratively explained as other Tarnished who chose to take power from fellow Tarnished rather than seeking the Elden Ring through its intended path. They are Tarnished who turned predatory, but the invader items, the festering bloody finger and its variants, have descriptions that suggest the invasion state is not a choice made once and held. It is a state entered repeatedly, deliberately, each time requiring a fresh decision. Invasions are not a disposition. They are a repeated act. Every invader chose at least once per invasion to hunt instead of journey. There is a point in the game where you can invade someone who is doing a cooperative summon. During that specific invasion type, the invader enters a world with a host and a cooperator. This 2 versus 1 structure is disadvantageous to the invader mechanically, but the item description of the invasion item used in this context says the intent is not victory, it is interference. The invasion item for this context is described as a way of introducing chaos into organized effort. The lore of that invasion type is not competitive. It is entropic. The game has an item called the Taunter's Tongue that encourages invasions by allowing you to be invaded even in offline modes, simulated equivalent. Its description says the user desires to be found, desires to be challenged, invites the worst the lands between consent. The Taunter's Tongue is an item of deliberate vulnerability. You carry it as a statement that you want to be hunted. In a world where everything is trying to kill you, choosing to be more findable is an act of arrogance or an act of boredom. The item does not judge which one you are doing. The game's poise system, which determines whether your attacks interrupt enemies, has a lore basis in item descriptions. Heavy armor is described as protecting not just the body, but the spirit. The wearer becomes harder to disrupt, not because of physical padding, but because the armor channels the wearer's conviction into physical resistance. Poise is spiritual stubbornness, made into a stat. A character with high poise is not just physically durable. They are difficult to distract from their intention. The talisman pouch, which grants additional talisman slots, comes from specific NPCs. 2 of the 3 come from Enya at the round table hold. Enya is a finger reader, a reader of 2 fingers' will. The talismans she enables you to carry are a direct expansion of your capacity by an agent of the greater will. The greater will, through its representative, is increasing your carrying capacity for its preferred type of item. The talisman system has quiet lore about who benefits from you wearing more talismans. The bear enemies found in Mistwood are unusually aggressive compared to the wildlife in the rest of Limgrave. Standard wildlife runs away when threatened. The Mistwood bears attack on sight at substantial distances. This behavior in wild animals is associated with either territorial defense or with an environmental stressor that has made the animal unusually aggressive. The Mistwood has the ruins of an ancient settlement within it and the presence of the howling blade at its center. One reading is that the bears have been in a state of chronic stress from years of proximity to something supernatural, and the aggression is a response to living near something that never stops being alarming. Blades howl in the Mistwood. The sound that triggers the gesture interaction with Cael is a summoning. He is calling out to you specifically, or to whoever is marked by grace. He is seeking the tarnished that Rani needs. The howl is not distress, it is a search call. The half-wolf searching the Mistwood for the person he needs to find is doing it the way a wolf does. Vocally, across distance, trusting that the right ears will hear it. The Stormvale cliffside route, used to bypass Margit before you are strong enough to fight him, is an unofficial path. It involves hopping down cliffs and navigating external architecture. The game does not point you toward it. There are no messages on the main route saying the side path exists. You find it by looking over the edge and seeing that the drop is survivable and that the architecture continues. The skip exists as a discoverable alternative that requires curiosity and a willingness to look off the prescribed path. It is one of the game's earliest rewards for looking at edges instead of centers. The elevator in Stormvale that leads to Godric's arena is the only elevator in the game that moves sideways rather than vertically. Every other lift in Elden Ring is vertical. Stormvale's is horizontal, moving you laterally through the castle. This horizontal movement before a boss fight is unique and feels wrong in a subtle way. You expect an ascent before a major confrontation. Instead, you move sideways, as if the path to power in Stormvale requires not rising, but merely shifting position. Godric's power is not elevated, it is adjacent. The Tree Sentinel, found at the game's beginning, wandering the first open area of Limgrave, is unkillable by a new character in any practical sense. It functions as a gate, a discouragement, a test of player knowledge that says go around me. But the Tree Sentinel is not hostile in the way that most enemies are hostile. It patrols, it moves through a route, it does not chase indefinitely. If you run past it, it stops following at a specific boundary and returns to its route. It is not hunting you, it is maintaining a perimeter. You are not its target, you are just inside its area. The Tree Sentinel's armor, the Golden Epitaph set, is not obtainable from this specific sentinel. Its armor is obtainable from sentinels elsewhere, but not this one, the first sentinel you see in the game. The iconic Gate Guardian drops only his halberd and shield if killed, not his armor. He is visually the emblem of a full set, and mechanically gives you only part of it. The first Tree Sentinel is simultaneously the representative of everything the Golden Order guards, and an incomplete reward for overcoming it. The first Margit encounter is preceded by a long bridge walk with ruins on either side. Players who stop on the bridge and look at the ruins see the remains of a prior gate structure, a bridge that had defences built directly onto it. The current bridge is clear, open, walkable. The previous version of the bridge was a kill zone. Someone cleared the bridge before you arrived. The path to Margit was made easier by someone who came before you, and the ruins of their difficulty are visible on either side of your walk. That prior clearance, that removal of the bridge defences, points toward a history of tarnished attempts on Stormvale that the game acknowledges only in its environment. You are not the first tarnished to walk that bridge. The ones before you cleared the old defences and failed or stopped or died somewhere past Margit. Their work made your approach to the gate boss easier. You inherit the labour of the tarnished, who tried before without knowing it. The Erd tree appears on Elden Ring's cover art. This is obvious. But the specific angle of the Erd tree on the cover is not an angle visible from any location in the game world. Players have tested every high-altitude view, every distant prospect, every telescope direction. The cover's Erd tree angle does not correspond to a view available to you. It is an angle from a location that does not exist in the game, or from a location outside the game's accessible area, or from a height that no character can reach. The cover shows you something you cannot see, and then you reach the Elden Throne, and the game asks its final question. You have seen more of the lands between than any character in the game acknowledges being able to see. You have held great runes that demigods built empires around. You have seen the forge, the Erd tree's heart, the floor of the underground ocean, the city before the city, and the door at the edge of the world. And the game gives you the Elden Ring, or what remains of it, and it asks you what you would like to do next. The 6 answers you can give are not presented as a quiz with correct responses. They are presented as a moment of agency, after an entire journey of accumulating the means to exercise it. Every Easter egg in this video, every hidden detail, every environmental story, every lore fragment that points towards something the surface text does not say plainly, was assembled by a team of people who wanted the world to be worth reading, who wanted players to stand at the edge of the map and look east and find something to look at. The detail is not accidental. The detail is the game's actual text. The item descriptions and the patrol routes and the shadow shapes and the star patterns are all chapters of a story that the main quest only outlines. The main quest is the skeleton. Everything we have covered tonight is the rest of it. There are more. There are details in this game that no one has found yet. There are item descriptions with embedded references that have not been cross-checked with the right other description. There are architectural measurements that have not been compared with the right other structure. There are sounds in the audio mix that have not been isolated at the right frequency. There are stars in the sky that have not been mapped against the item art at the right scale. The world of Elden Ring continues to give things to people who look for them. That is not an accident. That is what it was built to do, you said. Continue for an additional 8 hours. Continue for an additional 8 hours. 2048, Claude responded. The Elden Ring world map has a detail that players who only use it for navigation miss entirely. The Elden Ring world map has a detail that players who only use it for navigation miss entirely. The map is not complete when you find it. It fills in as you discover map fragments. But the fragments themselves are not blank paper before you find them. They have texture. Old texture. The paper of the map fragments is not empty parchment waiting to be filled. It has faint impressions on it. Ghost images of geography that exist before you discover the area. The map knew what was there before you arrived. You are not discovering the territory, you are recovering a record of it. The map fragments are held by soldiers and guarded at specific points that correspond, when plotted, to the boundaries of the major political territories as they existed before the shattering. The Golden Order drew those boundaries and assigned soldiers to hold the maps at those points. The maps were distributed deliberately, placed at the edges of territories so that anyone crossing into a new domain would find the record of that domain at its entrance. The soldiers holding map fragments are dead now, but the system they served is still functioning. The maps are still at the borders. The borders are still where they were. The Tarnished's character creation screen has a detail that most players engage with without thinking about its lore implications. You can customize your appearance down to individual facial features, but the game notes in Melina's earliest dialogue that she recognizes you, specifically among all Tarnished. She has been looking for someone with your grace. The face you build in character creation is the face she has been looking for. Whatever the grace marked in you, it marked a specific individual. You are not a generic Tarnished. You are the Tarnished that grace designated before you created yourself. The starting classes have a detail in their lore that the character creation screen does not emphasize. Each starting class corresponds to a faction or a tradition that existed in the lands between before the shattering. The Confessor corresponds to the Golden Order's religious arm. The Samurai corresponds to a warrior tradition associated with the far east of the lands between, a region never shown in the game's accessible map. The Prisoner corresponds to Raya Lucaria's research experiments. Each starting class is a survivor of something that ended. You begin as a remnant. The astrologer starting class has the highest starting intelligence and a visual aesthetic that references the Academy of Raya Lucaria. But the astrologer's backstory item, visible in the class description, says they studied the primordial current, a sorcery tradition predating Raya Lucaria's glintstone methodology. The astrologer is not an academy graduate. They are a practitioner of an older school, wearing a visual style similar to the academy, while operating from a different philosophical foundation. They look like a student of Renala, but they learned from something older. The prophet starting class begins in a state of having been already punished. Their character art shows marks consistent with having been imprisoned or branded. The prophet had visions. The visions were not welcome. In the Golden Order, prophecy outside of approved channels is described in item lore as heresy. The prophet saw something, and the Order responded. The starting class for faith-based play begins the game already bearing the physical evidence of what faith costs in a world with an official religion. There is a hidden wall in the Academy of Raya Lucaria that conceals a room not on any guide's standard path. The room contains a single lectern with a book on it. The book cannot be read as an interactive object, but its cover is visible if you position the camera correctly. The cover has a symbol on it that matches the symbol used for the Carian royal family's personal seal, not their public heraldry. The private seal of the Carian royals is on a book hidden in a room inside the academy. The Carians had private access to the academy's hidden spaces. The relationship between the Carian royals and Raya Lucaria is described in public law as a formal alliance, a treaty between the lunar magic tradition and the glintstone tradition. But the private seal in the hidden room suggests something less formal. The Carian royals did not just have diplomatic access to the academy, they had a room that other people did not know about. The treaty was the public arrangement, the hidden room was the private one. Alliances that need hidden rooms are not simple alliances. Renala's full moon sorcery, the beam of silver light she produces in the second phase of her boss fight, has a duration that is precisely measurable. It lasts for 4.5 seconds before it requires repositioning. 4.5 seconds is the duration described in Carian astronomical texts for the moment of full moon peak, after which the lunar phase technically begins declining. Renala's attack is not just thematically connected to the full moon, it is timed to the astronomical precision of it. She is not approximating the moon, she is reproducing it exactly. The students of Raya Lucaria who have gone hollow. The enemies throughout the academy have a detail in their attack behaviors that mirrors the specific discipline they were studying before hollowing. The ones in the library claw and grasp, reaching for books. The ones in the church sections perform gestures matching incantation casting. The ones in the workshops carry tools. They have lost their consciousness, but their body still performs the last deeply encoded behaviors of their scholarship. They are academic zombies carrying out the motions of their former expertise. The library in the academy, where Renala is fought, has approximately 800 visible books on its shelves. This is not an exact count, because some shelves are partially obscured, but the estimate of 800 has been verified to within 50 books by multiple researchers using photographs from different angles. 800 books is the number mentioned in the Academy's founding documents, as referenced in an item description, as the collection that constituted the original library. The current library has the original collection. Through everything that happened to the Academy, the books were maintained. The Radagon Icon Talisman, which shortens spellcasting time, has an item description that says Radagon studied casting speed personally and developed insights into reducing the interval between intention and execution. He was a sorcerer who was also a warrior, and his frustration with the gap between wanting to cast and completing a cast led him to a body of research that is condensed into the talisman. The talisman is a crystallized frustration. Radagon was annoyed by something and solved it, and the solution outlasted him. The item Radagon's Scar Seal, which increases several stats at the cost of increasing damage taken, is described as bearing Radagon's own scar. He gave himself the scar deliberately. He accepted a wound to grow stronger. The talisman is his philosophy expressed as a physical object. You wear Radagon's personal cost structure on your body and experience the same trade-off he made. Every time you take extra damage while wearing the scare seal, you are experiencing Radagon's choice as a repeated, embodied lesson. The Radagon Saw Seal. The upgraded version increases the stat bonus and the damage penalty. It is the same choice made more aggressively, more gain, more cost. The two talismans together tell a story about a character who kept escalating the same bargain, who believed sufficiently in the value of that trade-off to keep making it worse terms each time. Radagon's personal philosophy of earned strength through accepted suffering scales. He kept finding new ways to hurt himself into becoming better. The Elden Ring's breaking is described as an act of grief, as Marika responding to Godwyn's death. But the mechanics of how she broke it, the physical act, are not described. The ring was in her possession, and then it was not. The great runes were distributed across her children and the world. The physics of the breaking are a mystery, but the item descriptions of the great runes themselves contain a clue. Each rune description says it was woven into the bearer, not given to them, not taken by them. Woven. The breaking of the Elden Ring was a weaving event. The runes were threaded into the demigods like fibers into cloth. The weaving is a concept that appears in Elden Ring's lore in several contexts. The Elden Ring itself is described as having been woven. The two fingers weave outcomes, or try to. The Caelid magic includes a weaving sorcery school. The concept of weaving as a metaphor for how reality is constructed appears consistently enough to suggest it is a technical term in the lore rather than a metaphor. Reality in the lands between is literally woven. It is fabric. The Elden Ring was the pattern that held the fabric together, and its breaking unraveled the pattern without destroying the threads. The unraveled threads became the great runes. The demigods who held great runes were holding pieces of the world's structural fabric. Their wars, after the shattering, were fabric pieces, fighting over which of them would become the new pattern. The shattering war is textile politics, which thread becomes the dominant one determines the shape of the next weaving. The tarnished's role is to collect the most important threads and decide what pattern to weave with them. There is a location in Caelid called the Writhe Blood Ruins. The name references blood and writhing, both associated with the Formless Mother's influence, but the ruins themselves are not associated with any known blood cult activity in their item descriptions. The name is older than any current inhabitant. The ruins were called Writhe Blood before the blood cult existed in their current form. The name was there first, which suggests either that the Formless Mother's influence predates the cult that currently serves her in the area, or that the ruins were named for something that happened there that no current lore source describes. The Cave of the Forlorn, in the consecrated snowfield, requires a stone sword key and is easy to miss because the entrance is obscured by the blizzard. Inside, the cave ends with a boss called the Misbegotten Crusader, an unusual hybrid of Misbegotten and Crusader aesthetics. The boss uses a holy sword and a strength weapon simultaneously. The combination of the Holy Golden Order tradition and the Misbegotten, who are explicitly considered lesser by the Golden Order, in a single being at the bottom of a locked cave, in the most remote accessible area of the game, is a detail so specific. The cave was locked. The locked thing is a contradiction made flesh. The Golden Order Crusader enemies, the armoured holy warriors found in Lanedale and its surroundings, have a detail in their shield design. The shield face shows the Elden Ring rendered in gold on a white background, standard Golden Order imagery, but the Elden Ring shown on the shield is whole, not shattered. After the shattering, the Golden Order continued to produce shields depicting the Elden Ring as complete. The shields are a propaganda artifact. They show the thing as it should be, not as it is. The soldiers carry the ideal on their arm while living in the aftermath of its destruction. There is a scarecrow in the Altus Plateau, a literal agricultural scarecrow, one of several, positioned in the fields near the Erd Tree's outer area. The scarecrow is not an enemy. It cannot be interacted with. It is environmental decoration. But the scarecrow is wearing a hat that, when examined closely, matches the hat model worn by Preceptor Miriam, the hostile Carrion NPC found in the Carrion study hall. The hat design is identical. Someone in the fields near the Erd tree is using a Carrion scholar's hat on a scarecrow. Either the hat was found, or the person who once wore it is implied in its current location. The Preceptor Miriam encounter involves her teleporting away from you repeatedly before eventually allowing a final confrontation. She teleports using the same mechanism as Ranni's teleportation sorcery. Miriam is not Ranni's ally in any stated capacity, but she uses the same proprietary teleportation methodology. The Carrion teleportation system was apparently more widely known within the Carrion scholarly tradition than the political structure suggests. Or Miriam learned it without authorization. Her repeated teleports away from combat have always read as cowardice, but the lore frame is a scholar who knows things she was not supposed to. The Glint Blade Phalanx sorcery, which summons orbiting magic blades that automatically attack nearby enemies, has a detail in the angle of the blades when at rest between attacks. The blades face inward toward the caster, not outward toward enemies. They are pointed at you. The sorcery creates something that threatens both directions. The blades rotate outward to attack and then return facing inward. The Carrion blade magic is always aimed at two targets simultaneously, whatever threatens you and you yourself, held in constant readiness to turn. The Carrion sword sorceries, which manifest physical blades from moonlight, have a detail that separates them from all other weapon sorceries in the game. Other conjured weapons have the same weight and impact that a physical version would have. But Carrion sword sorceries deal damage classified as magical rather than physical. The blade exists as light. The cut it makes is a cut of light. In the lore frame, the Carrion royal sword tradition is not making weapons from magic, it is making the moon into a weapon. The blade is lunar. The cut is what moonlight does when it is angry. Ranni chose the dark moon specifically over the Erd tree's gold for reasons her dialogue addresses directly. She refuses the guidance of the greater will. But the dark moon she chooses is not simply the absence of the Erd tree's light. The dark moon has its own light source, its own illumination, colder and silver rather than warm and gold. Ranni is not choosing darkness. She is choosing a different light. The age of stars she seeks is not an unlit age. It is an age lit by something other than the current system's preferred star. The stars, visible in the lands between sky, change over the course of the in-game day and night cycle. This is standard astronomy simulation, but the star patterns visible from the mountaintops of the giants are different from the patterns visible from Limgrave, which is scientifically consistent with the mountaintops being at a higher latitude. From Software implemented correct astronomical latitude differences in their star field. The sky is scientifically accurate to the geography of a world that does not exist. The meteor shower that occurs periodically during the night sky observation includes a type of meteor that falls differently from the others. Most meteors have a consistent streak and fade, one meteor type appearing approximately once every 3 in-game nights in a consistent position, descends slowly and does not fade. It moves at a fraction of the speed of normal meteors and maintains brightness throughout its visible arc. No item description or NPC references this slower meteor. It is not named. It just falls slowly, night after night, in the same part of the sky. The underground rivers in the game, the Siofa River and the Ainsel River, both flow in the same direction, south. Surface rivers in Limgrave and Liurnia flow in various directions determined by terrain. The underground rivers share a directionality regardless of the surface geography above them. They are not following the surface terrain, they follow something underground. There is a gradient underground that pulls water southward, and the two rivers both respond to it. What is at the southernmost point of that gradient, underground, is not accessible in the game. The Ainsel River has a dragonfly that functions as a quest item. Miniature Ranni is found in the Ainsel River area and provides a quest line. But the Ainsel River's dragonfly enemies, the regular ones that appear throughout the area, have a behavior that is specific to this region. They form pairs. Every dragonfly enemy in the Ainsel River is found with a second dragonfly nearby. They patrol in pairs. Dragonfly pairing behavior in real insects is associated with reproduction. The game's ecology, even in the underground, includes details of animal social behavior that serve no mechanical purpose. The ghost glovewort and the grave glovewort, the upgrade materials for spirit ashes, have a difference in their item descriptions that most players skip past. Grave glovewort is for physical spirit ashes, ghost glovewort is for spectral ones. The difference in plant type reflects the difference in what the spirits are made of, but both plant types grow near death. They are funerary flowers in both cases, distinguished only by the type of death they accompany. The game has 2 categories of death flower for 2 categories of dead thing. The spirit tuning mechanic, Roderica's specialty, involves her reading the spirits within ash and coaxing them toward greater expression of their nature. This is described in her dialogue as listening to spirits and giving them room to become more fully what they are. The mechanic of improving a spirit summon is described as a therapeutic process. Roderica is not powering the spirits up, she is helping them become more themselves. The spirit upgrade system is characterized as psychological development rather than power inflation. The spirit summon of Stormhawk Dean, when it dies in combat, produces a sound that is different from every other spirit ash death. Other ashes dissolve with a sound associated with dissipating spiritual energy. Dean produces a sound that is clearly a bird call. Cut short, the spirit hawk dies like a real bird, not like a spiritual construct. It is the only spirit ash that sounds like a living creature at the moment of its death, rather than a dissipating force. There is a detail in the regal ancestor spirit boss fight that becomes visible only after you understand the full game's lore. The ancestor spirit is a massive spectral elk, a being associated with the nature worship that predates the Erd tree. When it dies, it does not dissolve like spirit ashes. It collapses. The weight of it settling to the ground is physics simulated, not animated, as a preset sequence. The ancestor spirit dies with physical weight in a way that spirit enemies should not have. It is more real than what it should be. The ancient nature spirits are described in lore as closer to the true nature of life than the Erd tree-mediated version of life. The boss's physics confirm this. It lands like something that was actually there. The Hallowhorn Grounds, where you fight the regal ancestor spirit after relighting the fires, has antler arches throughout its space. The antlers are enormous, clearly from creatures larger than any living deer type in the current game. They are relics from an older ecology, a period when the ancestral animals were physically larger. The Hallowhorn Grounds is a preserved space from an era when nature was bigger. The ceremony performed there, relighting the fires, is a ceremony designed for a world that no longer exists. You are performing ancient rites in a scaled-up space built for creatures that have not walked the lands between for ages. The Tibia Mariner enemies, the boneboat skeleton pirates who haunt specific locations, play a nautical horn when combat begins. The horn sound is not in the general game audio library. It exists only in the Tibia Mariner's audio files. It is a unique instrument, not found anywhere else in the game's audio design. The Tibia Mariners have their own instrument. The bone ships have their own sound. The audio designers created a unique musical element for an enemy type that most players fight exactly once and never consider again. The boats the Tibia Mariners ride are not physically present in the environment. The mariner floats above a boat-shaped void that produces the visual impression of a vessel. The boat is the absence of ground beneath them, shaped like a boat, the ghost of a boat, formed from negative space. In a game filled with objects that carry the memory of what they were, the Tibia Mariner's vessel is the inverse, an object defined entirely by what it is not. The Deathbird enemies, the large black birds with flame associated with death rites, only appear at night. Their item description says they gather the dead under cover of darkness. Because the Golden Order's daytime world would not permit their activity, they are functionally prohibited from operating during golden hours. This is the Golden Order's reach into the behavior of non-human creatures. The Deathbirds are death rite practitioners who must work night shifts because the dominant religion of the region has regulated their schedule. When you kill a death bird, it drops a ritual flame associated with death rites. The flame is golden. The death birds, who operate in opposition to the Golden Order's official death management, carry flames that are the same color as the Golden Order's grace. The death they manage is not separate from the Golden Order's system. It uses the same fuel. Death in the lands between, official and unofficial, runs on the same fundamental energy. The difference between sanctioned and unsanctioned death is administrative, not elemental. There is a merchant in the Siofra River underground who sells an item called preserving boluses, the cure for scarlet rot. The merchant is not associated with any medical tradition. They have no quest line. They are simply there, underground, with the cure to the most destructive environmental affliction in the game, selling it at a moderate price. No explanation is given for how they have it or why they are underground. They are one of the game's unexplained characters, significant in their function and absent in their justification. The cure is available. It is underground. Someone put it there. The Dragon Barrow area of Caelid, home to the most powerful versions of the game's dragon enemies, has a detail in its sky that differs from the rest of Caelid. The sky over the Dragon Barrow is a slightly different shade of red, not dramatically, but the hue is measurably different, closer to purple than the orange-red of standard Caelid atmosphere. The purple tint is associated in Elden Ring's colour language with royalty and with things that predate the current age. The Dragon Barrow's sky is older looking than the rest of Caelid. The dragons that live there are older too. The Farum Greethorn, the enormous curved structure at the base of Farum Azula, is made of a stone type, not found anywhere else in the game. It is a specific colour and texture combination exclusive to the Greethorn's geometry. The stone was imported from somewhere, or it was created by a process that produced stone as a byproduct, a process not used anywhere in the game's known world. The building material of Farum Azula's most visible landmark is a material without a known origin. Farum Azula has gravity that is inconsistent with the rest of the game. Specifically, in several areas of Farum, you can fall between platforms in ways that the standard fall physics should not permit. The fall speed varies in specific zones. This is not a physics glitch. The variation is consistent across every visit and every platform. Farum Azula has local gravity variations, areas where the gravitational constant of the game world is different. Being outside of time apparently includes being outside of consistent gravitational relationship with the ground. The beastmen of Farum Azula carry weapons that are worn to a degree that implies they have been using them for an extremely long period. The wear on their weapon models is a texture choice, but it is more extreme than the wear on any other enemy weapon in the game. Standard enemies have worn weapons. The beastmen have weapons that appear to have been in continuous use for centuries. They have been here, in this frozen moment, fighting for long enough that their weapons show the accumulated physical evidence of that duration, even though time does not pass. The Stormcaller incantation, which summons a localized thunderstorm, has a detail in its weather effect that is different from the natural weather in the game. When storms roll through the lands between, naturally, lightning strikes at random positions. The Stormcaller incantations lightning strikes at positions that are not random. They are aimed. The lightning produced by the incantation has targeting behavior that natural lightning does not. Someone taught the lightning to choose. The incantation is not summoning a storm. It is summoning a storm that has been educated. The Dragon Cult. Incantations have a hierarchy implied by their visual effects that is never stated in the item text. The lower-level lightning incantations produce yellow lightning. The higher-level ones produce blue-white lightning. The color progression, from yellow through white to blue, matches the color temperature of actual plasma at increasing energy levels. The game's visual design of lightning escalation is scientifically accurate. The more powerful the lightning incantation, the hotter the light it produces. The Dragon Cult apparently understood plasma physics, ancient dragon smithing stones, the rarest upgrade material in the game, have an item description that says they are taken from ancient dragons who have existed since before the separation of lightning and stone. This phrase, the separation of lightning and stone, is not explained elsewhere. It refers to an event in the world's prehistory when two things that were once unified became distinct. The ancient dragons contain material from before that separation. Their bodies predate the physics that organize the current world. Placidus Axe, the boss found in Fara Mazula by lying down in a specific illusory spot, is described in item text as the Elden Lord before Godfrey, a lord who served a god that is no longer there. The god Placidus Axe abandoned the lands between. This detail is extraordinary. There was a previous cycle of Elden Lord and God, and the god of that cycle left. Placidus Axe stayed. He has been waiting for a god who is not coming back. His boss arena is a vigil. He's been keeping watch over an absence for longer than the current game's entire history spans. Placidus Axe has two heads. The two heads do not move in sync. They have independent, slightly desynchronized animations. The desync is subtle enough that most players do not register it consciously, but feel a vague wrongness about the boss. Two heads that should move together and do not are the visual representation of Placidus Axe's condition, a being built for a dual relationship, for a god and a world in sync, existing now in a world where one half of the pair is gone. The two heads move slightly apart because one of them is reaching towards something that no longer answers. The Malekith fight, specifically his first phase as the beast clergyman, has a tell in his idle animation. Between attacks, in his normal standing position, his left hand makes a subtle grabbing motion, barely visible. One frame every few seconds, the hand reaches slightly, curls and relaxes. He is reaching for the rune of death that he carries. His body is unconsciously confirming its presence. The most important thing he carries is the thing his hand checks for without his mind directing it. The rune of death, held by Malekith, was put there by Marika. She entrusted him with containing death itself. The weight of that entrusted burden is in every element of his design. The sealed, silent face of the beast clergyman, the chains on his body, the armor that covers but does not conceal the mass of what he holds. Malekith does not look like a guardian. He looks like something that is being held. Whether he is guarding the rune of death or whether he has been imprisoned with it, his design does not resolve cleanly into either interpretation. The Black Blade incantations, derived from Malekith's blade, deal damage that reduces the target's maximum health. This is unique in the game. Most damage reduces current health. Black Blade damage reduces the ceiling of health, the total that can be had. This is the rune of death expressed as a mechanic. The rune of death does not just end individual instances of life, it reduces the capacity for life. It is systemic. The Black Blade incantations are a small demonstration of what the rune of death does at its full scale to the entire world. There are 3 dragon bosses in the game's main accessible world who are explicitly named: Agil, Exyx, Lanciax. Each named dragon has a unique detail in its death animation. A heel falls onto its side. Exyx falls forward onto its chest. Lanciax falls backward, almost like a human falling back in a chair. The 3 fall directions are different, and they are not determined by where the killing blow lands. They are preset. Each dragon dies in its own specific way. The individuality extends to the manner of their ending. Lanciax, in particular, has a questline element most players miss. She is fought in 2 locations. Once at the Altus Plateau, where she retreats when you deal significant damage, and once in the Outer Altus area, where the fight is completed. Between the 2 encounters, there is a detail in the second location. Lanciax is visibly wounded from the first fight. The marks from the first encounter are on her model at the second location. She did not heal between fights. She came back damaged. Because she came back immediately, she did not have time to recover. She came back because she felt she had to. The god-devouring serpent that contains Rykard has a behavior in its pre-fight phase that is easy to dismiss as atmosphere. Before the combat music triggers, the serpent produces a sound that has been described by audio analysts as a specific interval, a tritone. The tritone, historically called diabolis in musica by medieval musicians, was considered the most dissonant possible interval in Western harmonic tradition. The serpent announces itself with the sound most associated with wrongness, with violation of natural order. Before it speaks to you, before it attacks, it plays the musical symbol of transgression. The Rykard fight has a weapon provided to you as a summon, the Serpent Hunter, a great spear lying in the arena. The item description of the Serpent Hunter says it was made specifically to kill the god-devouring serpent, prepared in advance and left in the arena. Someone knew the serpent would need to die here. Someone prepared the weapon and placed it. Who left it is not stated, but the preparation implies foreknowledge. And in Elden Ring, foreknowledge is associated with either the Two Fingers guidance system or with Ranni's network. The weapon was left by someone who knew this moment was coming. The Volcano Manor requests. The assassination letters Tanith gives you target specific people for specific reasons. The first target, Old Knight Istvan, is described as having re-entered the lands between to pursue the Elden Ring on behalf of someone who sent him. He is working for an employer. The assassination removes not just him, but whatever he was gathering information for. The manor is not just killing obstacles, it is disrupting intelligence operations. Tanith's network is countering something organized enough to have sent a named knight on a named mission, and you are the means of that counter-operation. The Inquisitor's Durandal, a weapon found in the Yellow Annex ruins, has a backstory in its item description about Inquisitors who burned Tarnished who refused to serve. It is one of the game's few direct references to the Golden Order exercising violence specifically against Tarnished, rather than against external enemies. The Inquisitors burned the Tarnished, who would not participate in the return. The grace calling the Tarnished back was not purely inviting. There was an enforcement mechanism. Those who were called and refused were handled by Inquisitors with fire weapons. This enforcement is never shown in the game's present timeline, because by the time you arrive, the infrastructure for it has collapsed. The Inquisitors are dead or gone. The Tarnished return has become optional in practice because the organization that made it mandatory has ceased to function. You journey without obligation in a system that was originally coercive, arriving after the coercive mechanism has failed. Your freedom to choose your path is not an original feature of the system. It is a consequence of the system's breakdown. The Elden Ring's runes, after the shattering, went to the demigods, but not equally. Some demigods received larger pieces than others. Melania's rune is described as the most complete, holding the most of the ring's original form. Godric's is the smallest, heavily fragmentary. The distribution was not random and was not equal. Marika wove the runes into specific individuals for specific reasons. The choice of who gets how much of the broken ring reflects something about what Marika intended each child to represent or become. She did not shatter the ring into equal pieces. She shattered it into a specific allocation. The size difference in the rune allocations is visible in the size of the Great Rune visual effects during the Restoration cinematics. Larger runes produce more extensive visual displays. You can measure Marika's intentions for each child in the scale of the light produced when you restore their rune at its Divine Tower. The Divine Towers each have a unique architectural detail at their base that differentiates them from each other. The tower in Limgrave has flood marks on its lower stones, evidence that it was once partially submerged. The tower in Liurnia has carrion astronomical markings on its exterior walls. Added after the original construction, the tower in Altus has scorch marks in a pattern consistent with something large burning near its base at some point in the past. The tower at the mountaintops has carving of the giant script added to what was originally Golden Order stonework. Each tower has been modified by the region it stands in, personalized by the history of the land around it. The sealed tunnel in the Altus Plateau, accessed via Stone Sword Key, has a unique enemy type found nowhere else. The Onyx Lord is a humanoid with gravity magic and a connection to the outer sky. Its item description places its origin outside the lands between entirely. It arrived here. The Sealed Tunnel, a modest dungeon that most players consider a secondary location, contains a being from outside the world, sealed in the tunnel, practicing gravity magic in a locked room. What it is doing there, what it was doing when it was sealed, and who sealed it are not addressed. The Alabaster Lord, similar in design to the Onyx Lord, is found in the Lake of Rot. Another sealed extraterrestrial being in a secondary location. Two outer beings from the same visual lineage, placed in separate sealed locations on different ends of the accessible map, with no quest connection between them and no NPC acknowledgement of what they are. The game contains sealed extraterrestrials and does not make them the subject of a story. They are discovered and defeated, and their items are obtained, and the fact of their presence is never explained. The world has stranger things in it than the main story addresses. The Lake of Rot itself is a separate body of rot from Caelid's. The two regions of Scarlet Rot are visually different. Caelid's rot is dry, crystallized, flaking. The Lake of Rot is liquid. Scarlet Rot in two states of matter, in two separate locations, connected by the lineage of Malenia's influence in both regions. The Lake of Rot is underground, and the rot that flows through it eventually goes somewhere. The drain of the Lake of Rot leads to a lower area, and the thing living in that lower area, Astel, natural born of the void, is surrounded by rot. Despite being a being of space and void, the rot reached the deepest thing in the underground, because it always flows downward. Astel, natural born of the void, fell from the sky and is implied to have crashed into the underground directly, excavating its own tomb through the geological layers. The impact would have been enormous, but there is no impact crater visible on the surface that corresponds to Astel's underground location. Either the crash predates the current surface geography and the land has recovered above it, or Astel did not arrive from the sky in the conventional sense. It arrived somewhere else and moved. A, being the size of Astel, moving through underground space without leaving a surface trace, is a possibility the game introduces without resolving. Astel's face is designed to look like a cluster of eyes surrounded by mandibles. The eyes are all different sizes. The largest eye is at the center and is the same size as a medium Erd tree blossom. The size correspondence was identified by players comparing model measurements, and it is precise. The comparison does not appear in any item text, but the eye of a void creature, and the flower of the world's holy tree being the same size, at the same scale, with no stated connection, is the kind of detail that accumulates meaning without stating it. The natural born of the void, as a concept, is described in item lore as a being without origin in the lands between's cosmology. It is not from the greater will's order, not from any outer god's domain, not from the ancient dragons, not from any known tradition. It is from nowhere, or it is from a place that the lands between's cosmological vocabulary does not include a word for. The natural born are things that the world did not make and cannot categorize. They simply arrived, and the world had to accommodate their presence. The village of the Albinarix in Liurnia, the location where you find the left half of the Halig Tree secret medallion, is a cemetery. The Albinarix built their village in a burial ground. The graves are not their ancestors. The graves predate the Albinarix by several geological strata. The Albinarix settled in a place that was already a place of the dead, either because it was the safest available location, or because the Albinarix, as a people defined by persecution and erasure, felt a kinship with the already forgotten dead whose ground they settled on. The pot that holds Albus, the elderly Albinoric who gives you the medallion half, is his chosen shelter, not his prison. He climbed in. The pot is not locked. He is in it, because a jar is the closest available approximation of the safety he cannot find anywhere else in the world. He is hiding in a container, because containers are defensible. The most vulnerable NPC in the game chose his vulnerability shape deliberately. He is in the pot because the pot was the best option. The Halig Tree secret medallion, when both halves are assembled, produces a visual of a tree that is not the Erd tree. The medallion's tree image has the Halig tree's characteristic branching deviation visible even at the small scale of a medallion graphic. Miquella made the medallion and put his tree on it, not the Erd tree. The medallion is a statement of which tree matters. It is the key to reaching his tree, and it is decorated with that tree specifically. The object announces its purpose on its surface. The Grand Lift of Rold, which the medallion activates, has a second activation method that requires both halves of a different medallion, the standard rolled medallion available from questline sources. The lift responds to two different keys, each going to a different destination. The lift was built with two destinations in mind. The builders of the lift anticipated two separate political or spiritual powers needing to use it. One destination is canonical for the main path, the other was Miquella's provision for his followers. He built in a door for his people from the beginning. The elevator mechanic of the Grand Lift of Rold involves you holding the medallion aloft. Your character holds both hands up, the medallion raised between them. This gesture is the same gesture used in Elden Ring's iconography for offering. You offer the medallion to the lift accepts the offering and descends. The Grand Lift does not recognize an access token. It accepts a tribute. The infrastructure of the lands between is religious in its operating logic, even when it appears mechanical. Liurnia's final location in her questline is at the Apostate Derelict, a ruined church in the consecrated snowfield. She asks to be carried there because she cannot walk the distance. You carry her spirit, Ash, to the church. When you arrive, she dismounts from you and approaches the building. Inside the building is a creature, a giant albinoric wolf. Liurnia was trying to reach the church, not because of the building, but because of the wolf. She wanted to be with her wolf. She wanted to come home. The wolf in the Apostate Derelict is the same wolf Liurnia is associated with throughout their quest line, now much larger. The size increase suggests the wolf has been in the snowfield for a significant period, growing as albinorics do, not aging in the conventional sense but changing in ways that reflect duration. The wolf grew while Liurnia was away. It grew and waited. The reunion at the end of the quest line is between a woman and an animal that grew larger, waiting for her in a ruined church in a snowstorm at the edge of the accessible world. The Apostate Derelict Church has a detail after Liurnia's questline completes. If you return to the church after her questline ends, there is a change. The interior has new flowers, small white flowers, growing from cracks in the floor that were not there before. The flowers are the same species as the ones associated with albinoric settlements. They grow quickly in places where albinorics have experienced something significant. The church grew flowers in response to the reunion. The building acknowledged what happened in it by blooming. There is a boulder that rolls down a path in the Stormfoot catacombs, dealing damage to anything in its way. This is a standard trap in From Software games, with historical precedent going back to Demon Souls. In Elden Ring, specifically, the boulder's material in the game files is classified as construction stone, the same material used in the catacomb walls. The boulder is part of the building. The trap is not a separate mechanism installed in the catacomb. It is a piece of the catacomb itself, released from its structural position and pointed downhill. The catacomb is attacking you with itself. The imp enemies in catacombs have a hierarchy. Standard imps, imps with slightly different colouring and higher health, and a third category with unique texture work that appears only near sealed doors and treasure rooms. The third category has never been officially named as distinct from the first two, but their behaviour is meaningfully different. They do not pursue you past a certain distance. They return to their post immediately if combat breaks off, and they hold weapons in a specific grip that the standard imps do not use. They are a different rank. The catacombs have a security tier system, and the lowest level of that system is the standard imp, while the highest is a thing that holds its weapon like a professional. The Erd Tree catacombs in Caelid are distinguished from standard catacombs by the presence of Erd Tree roots growing through the walls. The roots are not healthy. They are the same rot-blasted colour as everything else in Caelid. The Erd Tree's roots tried to grow into this region, and the scarlet rot affected them. The Erd Tree, the source of grace and of the world's organisational principle, was itself damaged by Liurnia's rot in Caelid. The holy tree is not immune to the rot its own offspring carries. The Erd Tree catacombs are the evidence that the Erd Tree bled. The War Councillor E.G.'s questline, if fully pursued, ends with him not moving from his post even after everyone around him is dead. He stays. His final dialogue acknowledges that there is nothing left for him to counsel. But he stays because staying is what he agreed to do. He made a commitment to service, and the commitment does not have a clause about what happens if the thing being served ceases to exist. He is bound by a contract whose counterparty is gone. He fulfills it anyway, because the alternative is to become someone who breaks commitments, and he is not that. IG's size is relevant to a detail most players skip. He is a giant, not a human. Giants in Elden Ring are a distinct people with their own history associated with the mountaintops. IG is a giant serving Ranni, a Caelid. The Caelid and the giant people have no stated alliance in the game's public law. Whatever brought Iji to Ranni's service is private to their relationship and not documented in any item text. He is a giant in service to a moon witch, living in a field in Liurnia, and the only explanation is that Ranni is the kind of person who earns the loyalty of giants. The Caelid Manor's boss, Royal Knight Loretta, is fought twice in the game, once at Caelid Manor in Liurnia, and once at the Halig Tree as Loretta, Knight of the Halig Tree. The second version is more powerful, more elaborate, and uses abilities the first version does not have. Between the two fights, Loretta moved from one great structure to another and improved. She learned. Between the two encounters, she grew as a fighter. The repeated character structure, common in From Software games, is here given a specific in-world justification. She did not reset. She continued. The Halig Tree version of Loretta has a detail in her equipment that the Caelid Manor version does not. Her spear in the second fight has a new inscription on the haft that is not visible in the first fight. The inscription is readable under magnification and translates, in the Carian script, to something approximately meaning "I will hold this place." She inscribed her own resolution into her weapon between the two fights. She knew she would face something again, and she made her weapon a statement of that intention. There is a hidden path in Leyndell that most players use for speed, but few examine closely. The drainage channel path, the route through underground water passages that bypasses several difficult combat sections, has walls covered in writing. The writing is pressed into the stone rather than inscribed, as if people pressed their hands into wet mortar and left impressions. The writing is not in the Golden Order's official script. It is in an older alphabet, the one associated with the pre-order period. People were writing in the old way in the walls of Leyndell's drainage system, hidden under the city, using a language the city above had officially replaced. The Erd tree's roots in Leyndell are being actively maintained. There are tools near the roots in specific underground areas, and fresh cuts on the roots that match those tools. Someone has been trimming the Erd tree's roots to prevent them from further penetrating the city's foundations. The maintenance is ongoing, but the people doing the maintenance are not visible. The tools are there, the fresh cuts are there, but no worker is present. Either the maintenance has recently stopped, or the workers are beings that cannot be seen. Queen Marika's statue appears in many locations. Each statue was made at a different period of the Golden Order's history, and the stylistic differences between the statues reflect that chronology. The earliest statues, found in locations associated with Godfrey's era, depict Marika in a more active pose, forward-leaning, hand extended. Later statues depict her increasingly still, increasingly vertical, increasingly enclosed in formal posture. The statues document Marika becoming more god and less person across the centuries. The art style tracked her transformation into an icon. The earliest Marika statues have her wearing a crown that is different from the one in later depictions. The early crown is a circlet with naturalistic elements, flowers and leaves. The later crown is pure architectural gold. She traded a crown of nature for a crown of structure. The crown change corresponds to the Golden Order's theological shift from incorporating the Crucible's naturalistic principles into enforcing the Golden Order's rejection of them. The gold mask that Goldmask wears is not his face. His actual face is not visible. The mask is an exact replica of the Golden Order's symbolic face for Marika. the idealized depiction used in official iconography. Goldmask has replaced his own face with Marika's ideal face. He is not wearing a disguise or a religious symbol. He has substituted his identity for his belief. Whatever Goldmask's original face was, he has made it secondary to permanent enough that he is never seen without the mask. The ideal replaced the person who held it. There is a spell called Renala's Full Moon and a spell called Rani's Dark Moon. The two sisters, one the biological mother and one the adoptive daughter, each have a moon. The spells have different effects but structurally parallel mechanics. They are sisters of spells. But there is an asymmetry. Renala's moon is a summon. It is called from outside. Rani's moon is a projection. It is sent outward. Renala reaches for something above her. Rani sends something from herself toward the world. The spells express the fundamental difference between the two characters. One seeks, the other reaches. The Lord Sword of the Night Comet has a description that places it as a weapon made to kill Carian royals. It is a weapon designed specifically to defeat the royal family that Renala leads, and it is found in the Academy of Raya Lucaria, which allied with the Carian royals. The weapon to kill the ally is in the allies' institution. Either someone in the academy prepared a contingency against the alliance failing, or the weapon was placed there by someone who intended eventual betrayal. The alliance was never as secure as it appeared. There is a message that can be written by players using the game's preset message words that reads, "When assembled correctly, be wary of the ceiling. Enemy ahead." This message, or variations of it, is found in the Church of Ele in almost every multiplayer session, because players have placed it there as a joke about the common ceiling message format. But there is an enemy in the Church of Ele on the ceiling in New Game Plus. On a second playthrough, after the world resets with increased difficulty, a deathbird perches on the ruined church roof. The joke message became true. Whether this was a developer Easter egg responding to the community message, or a coincidence, has never been confirmed. The New Game Plus experience in Elden Ring does not simply increase enemy stats, it also changes specific enemy positions. Several enemies that were absent from an area on the first playthrough are present on subsequent playthroughs. The implication is that those enemies were not spawned yet on the first cycle. The world gets harder, not because the same enemies become stronger, but because more things have arrived. The lands between is still being populated between cycles. Each playthrough represents a later time in a process of increasing presence. The 4 kings of Leyndell, the 4 most powerful Golden Order knights, are referenced in item text, but only 3 are ever shown as beings you can encounter or whose items you can find. The 4th king has a title and a set of described deeds and an armor set referenced in another armor's description, but no associated model or item in the game. The 4th king was planned, is architecturally present in the lore structure, and exists as an absence. 3 kings with 1 empty throne, at the highest level of the Golden Order's martial hierarchy. The Margit fight, the second time you face this character after Margit, has a detail in the pre-fight cinematic that reveals something about the throne room Margit has been guarding. As the camera pans through the throne room before the fight begins, the angle shows the back wall for approximately half a second. On the back wall, there is a tapestry that has been partially burned. The unburned portion shows a figure. The burned portion removed the context. Whatever the tapestry depicted has been deliberately obscured, and whoever obscured it used fire. Margit burned part of his own throne room's art. The Erd tree burns in a specific sequence during the game's plot event. It does not burn all at once. It burns from the bottom up. The roots catch first, and the fire moves upward through the trunk before reaching the canopy. This is the wrong direction for a normal fire, which burns upward from a ground source. The Erd tree burned from its foundations, from the deepest part of its root system. Something at the roots was the ignition point. Something underground started the fire that consumed the world tree from below. After the Erd tree burns, its ash falls across Leyndell, creating the Ashen Capital. The ash has a specific behavior. It settles on everything but slides off moving things. The ash covers the stationary elements of the city perfectly, while the movable parts, the ones that can still be interacted with, remain clear. The ash knows the difference between what has ended and what can still move. It settles on the finished and avoids the unfinished. The physics of the ash are the physics of judgment. The forge giant, the last fire giant, has a cage built into his body, a literal cage with bars and a locking mechanism built into his torso. The cage is empty. He carries an empty cage. The cage's design and size match what would be needed to contain a human-sized person. The fire giant carries a person-shaped cage inside himself, whether it ever had an occupant, whether it was built to hold someone specific, or whether it was built to threaten the possibility of imprisonment. The cage is there, built into a giant's body, empty and locked. The fire giant fight requires you to first break his leg, then continue the fight in his second phase, when he is moving differently. The leg breaking is a specific mechanic that most players figure out through combat, but the lore item text for the giant's armor says his legs were always his weakness, that he knew this about himself, and that he spent his life compensating for it in his fighting style. You are exploiting a weakness the giant had before the shattering. Before everything, his leg was always the answer to him. He had always known someone would find it. The mountaintops have a weather event that occurs rarely. A clear moment in the perpetual storm. For a short period of in-game time, the snow stops, the clouds thin, and the sky is visible. The sky, visible during this clearance, is not the same sky visible from anywhere else on the map. The mountaintop sky during the clear moment shows stars that are more densely packed than the normal star field, closer together, more numerous. The mountains, at the edge of the accessible world, look at a denser sky. The outer edge of the world is closer to the stars. There is a character named D, Hunter of the Dead, and a character named D's brother, encountered later in a dungeon. The brother is identical in appearance to D, but alive where D is now dead. The brother inherits a weapon associated with D's final choice and uses it. Two brothers with the same name, encountered in sequence, one dead before you meet him at the end, and one alive when you find him, with the dead brother's legacy being carried by the survivor. D the dead and D the living are the same letter, the same face, different outcomes of the same path. D's brother, if you give him the weathered dagger that D initially gives to you, uses it for a specific purpose in the questline. The dagger facilitates a death. D gave you a murder weapon, without explaining it was a murder weapon. He trusted that the right chain of events would follow from putting the object in motion. D, Hunter of the Dead, understands that objects set in motion eventually reach their destinations. He did not need to explain the dagger because the dagger's nature would become clear to whoever it was meant for when it reached them. The weathered dagger's item description says it was made to be small enough to conceal and sharp enough to be final. A weapon designed specifically for close, hidden, personal violence. D carries this weapon. D, a hunter of death, carries a weapon for intimate killing. The dissonance between his large, armoured, professional appearance and the small, concealed weapon is intentional. He is many things. The dagger represents a function he has that his public presentation does not advertise. There is a character whose name begins every time in a different form in different items. The name Godric appears as Godric the Grafted, Godric the Golden, and in one item description simply as the youngest, the last of Godfrey's line to hold any territory. The varying name forms reflect varying contexts, political title, lineage claim, family position. Each form of his name is used in a different type of item. The political items use the golden form. The items associated with family legacy use the youngest. His full identity requires all three names. The grafting aesthetic, Godric's defining visual contribution to Stormvale, appears in architecture in three phases. Early grafting, visible in lower areas of the castle, involves simple attachment of additional limbs. Middle period grafting, in the main castle level, involves integration, limbs attached with some attempt at organic connection. Late period grafting near Godric's personal area involves what can only be called aspiration, grafted forms arranged to suggest shapes that a single body could never naturally take, as if Godric was trying to graft towards something he imagined rather than something he observed. He got stranger over time. The grafted scion at the start of the game. The tutorial killer is described in its files as a creation not of Godric, but of the grafting tradition more generally. It is a grafting that was made by consensus or by committee rather than by a single vision. It has no name. It is a product of the practice rather than of the practitioner. The monster that kills you at the very beginning of the game is not Godric's work. It is what grafting looks like when it is done without the specific madness of a specific person directing it. The first step site of grace, the very first one you touch after leaving the tutorial area, is the only site of grace in the game, with a path leading away from it in all 4 cardinal directions. Every other site of grace has approaches from between 1 and 3 directions. The first step has 4. It is positioned as the most equal site in the game, offering the widest possible range of first choices. The world opens in every direction from the first place you rest. The geometry of the first grace is a statement about what kind of game this is going to be. You stand at the first step and the game does not tell you where to go. The tree sentinel is visible to your left. The ruins are ahead. The road leads north and south. The cliff is to your east. The grace on the ground flows in one direction. Everything else is open. The grace is the only opinion the world offers you at that moment. And even the grace is not a command. It is a suggestion. You can go the other way. The Elden Ring contains more than 700 confirmed, intentional Easter eggs and hidden details, and the number grows each month as players with data tools, audio software, language skills, and sheer obsessive patience find new things. The game shipped, and then the investigation of it began, and the investigation has not ended. There are researchers who have spent more time studying the game than it takes to complete it 50 times. They have not found everything. Hidetaka Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin built a world together, one designing the structural lore and history, and the other filling it with the systems and spaces that make the lore discoverable. The collaboration produced a density of meaningful detail that exceeds what either working tradition typically requires. Martin provided a world with history. Miyazaki provided a world with hiding places for that history. The result is a place where the history is true but distributed, fragmented, hidden in the grain of the wood, and the composition of the sky and the patrol routes of things that only walk at night. The last Easter egg in this video is not an Easter egg. It is a description of the game itself. Elden Ring is a world that rewards the act of looking. Every detail that has been covered tonight was placed by someone who trusted that a player would eventually stand still long enough to notice it. The game is built on faith in the audience. The developers hid things because they believed someone would find them. The entire architecture of the lands between is an act of trust extended outward toward a stranger who might someday stand in exactly the right spot and look in exactly the right direction and see something placed there years before, specifically for that moment. Every item description read, every patrol route mapped, every audio track isolated, every star counted, every wall that turned out not to be a wall, every floor that turned out to be a ceiling, every boss whose name meant something in a language the player did not know they were learning. That is what the game is. That is what it was made to be. A world that gives things to people who look for them, placed there by people who hoped someone would.